A warm and friendly hello. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the Beeson Family of Podcasts. We've got an excellent podcast for you. Joining me in segment number 2 is Sean Paul. He does great work over at Action Network. I know that he also does amazing work over at the Field of 68. We're going to get a few takeaways that he had from what was a very rambunctious weekend of college basketball. Dive a little bit into some of these teams that might be suffering from a little bit less home flavor than what they would like with so many kids away for Christmas break, what have you. So we're going to be diving in on that topic. We'll take a look at a few games that we've got for Tuesday. And he also did a nice article on a few mid-major teams that he's watching out for. So we're going to be diving into that in segment number 2. In the final segment, going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Tuesday, as we had some bank shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways we fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @GNet_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM. Name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire on whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Really didn't get in any of those Twitter/X questions today. And just a little reminder, because the Greg Peterson experience does happen from midnight to 3 Eastern Time, Pacific Time. That would be 9 to midnight. In terms of Portland State, Fresno State, and Eastern Washington, Cal Poly, not able to give you a lot there, as it wasn't necessarily the most rambunctious day of college basketball anyway, but we did see some interesting results. So let's take a look back at everything that we got, try to find some trends, and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
By the way, as I do this podcast, this is a game that has yet to go final, but I'm pretty sure that Sacramento State did not cover as 1.5-point favorites, as they're currently down 50-22 at the half against UC San Diego, with UC San Diego just putting up a butt kicking there. But most marquee team that we did see in action on Monday was likely Michigan State. They were able to pretty much piggyback off of Prosperity after knocking off Baylor. They win, they cover against Oakland by a count of 79-62. Oakland has actually been really good in these step-up games, by the way. Knocked out Xavier, held in there within 11 points against Illinois and Ohio State, but went just 9 of 29 from three-point range in this one, and it feels like a Michigan State team that was such a good three-point shooting team a season ago, starting to find that swagger once again. They go 9 of 21 from three-point range in this one. Your main man, Ty Walker, only had 14 points, as he got some help from Jaden Akins, AJ Hoggard. They combined for 9 assists. They had 11 points apiece, and for Michigan State, just 8 turnovers. So it does feel like they are starting to turn the corner, and things are starting to be a little bit more rosy out there for Maine. They've been one of your better cover teams thus far this season, but they got mained against Central Florida. Central Florida is able to get it done 74-51 on a night where Maine went 1 of 19 from three-point range. And Central Florida is a top 25 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. I do think we're going to see a little bit of regression from those three-point shooting defense numbers. And for Central Florida, the guy that was really able to get it done in this one, how about the 16 points that we saw out of Darius Johnson? Did a very solid job coming in off the bench. And for Central Florida, against a Maine team that does a really good job of generating turnovers, they turned the ball over just 9 times. Wake Forest, they were able to take it to Delaware State, 88-59. Delaware State, it's about a 20.5-point underdog. Did not stand a chance in this one, as Wake Forest has been the beneficiaries of getting Efton Reed back in the fold, who really didn't give you anything in terms of scoring, but he did have 7 rebounds, and just having another body out there for a Wake Forest team that's very top-heavy. That's been very helpful for them, as Delaware State went just 3 of 14 from three-point range, and Delaware State loses the rebound battle 36-34 and the turnover battle by a count of 18-10 as well. So that was a little bit of a less than savory result out of them. A team that has been very good to the over thus far this season has been UT Martin, and they played another over against Evansville, with Evansville being a 7.5-point favorite on the close. Evansville was up 13 with about 5.5 minutes remaining. I think there might have been some 7s out there, but in a nip and tuck game, Evansville gets it done by a count of 98-91. And if you're thinking this might have been a little bit of a rough beat, let's share with you the bad beat of the day that we did see. Anyone that saw this one, boy, oh boy. If you had the total on the opener right around like a 138.5, 139.5, something in that neighborhood, I pour one out for you, and I was one of those people that lost on this stunk. 75-65 the final, as this man, Marcus Niblack, had a really nice game, by the way. He puts up there 29 points, 7 assists, 6 rebounds, but the only thing people are talking about is that with mere seconds remaining, he pretty much double-dribbled, traveled, and he put in there a dunk in garbage time that pushed the total over. So that was a little bit rough to say the least, but for Louisiana Monroe, they go just 4 of 18 from three-point range. You did have Nika, can't pronounce the last name, go off for 17 points, 11 rebounds, and for Niblack, he was really the main guy for a Jacksonville team that went 8 of 14 from three-point range, so that was a massive performance out of them. And how about Operation Back Chicago State? If for the longest of long times it was always Operation Fade Chicago State, well, the first time I ever wrote them up with my DK Network write-up, they come up aces for us. As when I wrote it up, they were a 2-point favorite. They closed more around 4 to 4.5 point favorites. I'm doing this with 30 seconds remaining, and they're up by 12 plus points, so they're going to get there here. As for Chicago State, they only went 4 of 15 from three-point range, but Wesley Cardet has himself a nice 20-point game. For Chicago State, they win the battle on the glass, and all of a sudden, that's 3 straight wins for Chicago State, 4 wins in their last 5 games. This team all of a sudden has something going. The defense has been pretty rock solid, giving up 73 points or fewer in all 5 of their games as far this month, and they're going to be a new member in the NEC soon as well. So absolutely love to see that. And then game number 1 with Andre Curbelo in the fold for Southern Miss yields a win. If you took the closing number, you were unable to get there. This game lands 3. If you took the opener, you did 82-79 the final. In his debut for Andre Curbelo, it was the Andre Curbelo experience. What can I say? He had 11 points off the bench. He had 6 assists, 2 steals, 6 rebounds, some nice plays, and 4 turnovers. And he also went 0 of 2 from three-point range. That's just Andre Curbelo. He's got a lot of ability, and at the same time, decision-making not necessarily on par, but it did help out Austin Crawley along with Mo Arnold. These 2 guys in the backcourt did combine for 5 turnovers, but 37 points. These 2 guys went to combine 7 of 16 from three-point range. You need to work on if you're Southern Miss at 12 of 20 free throw shooting, and for Lamar, you did have 16 points out of Adam Hamilton as the team went just 6 of 22 from three-point range, so they had a little bit of a rough go of it there. And if you're looking at college basketball right now, what is really having a rough go of it is favorites trying to cover the spread. Over the last 7 days, it has been all about the underdogs. Underdogs in the last 7 days are 96, 85, and 6 against the spread. That's a 53% hit rate, and home underdogs just continue to bark. 25, 18, and 3 against the spread. Meanwhile, overs have a little bit of a lead on unders over the last 7 days. 92 overs, 89 unders. We've had 6 pushes along the way, so we're seeing a lot more pushes on these totals as well as overall for the season. Overs are selling at a rate about 51.2%, 883 overs, 840 unders. And if you look at non-overtime games, by the way, the under is sitting at a 50.7% clip, but when you get to overtime, well, they don't call it undertime. And home underdogs this far this season, pretty darn solid. 206, 193, and 9 against the spread, and underdogs are hitting at 50.1%. They have a slight lead over favorites. So that's what we're seeing in college basketball right now, and that's what we all got on Monday. Coming up next, we're going to turn it forward to Tuesday, talk with our good friend Sean Paul about the mid-majors that are really catching his eye, how he's gauging this week with some kids off campus in terms of home court environment, and so much more right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the Beeson Family Podcast.
Sports Betting Innovative Analytics has taken the guesswork and emotion out of sports betting to bring you an innovative and trustworthy resource to enhance your journey to becoming a winning player. With industry-leading money-back guarantee options backed by their sophisticated modeling, they want to introduce you to a system that's not widely seen or available to help you beat the bookmaker. Specializing in NBA, college basketball, and WNBA, your first week is always free. Get started at SBIA1.com today.
And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the Beeson Family Podcast. It is great to be joined by this man, as Sean Paul He does absolutely tremendous work over at the Field of 68, hosting their mid-major show with one of our good friends, Brian Burton, who also does absolutely excellent work in the Spear. Coupled with that, he does an incredible job over at Action Network, taking a look at all things college basketball. He put out a great article last week on some of his top mid-majors in all of college basketball, which certainly we're going to be hitting upon in the next few minutes. And to be able to follow Sean on Twitter/X, as that his first and last name, Sean Paul, and then the letter CBB, and always have to specify this. It is the S-E-A-N spelling on Sean, one of the more, I guess you call it traditional ones. As Sean, it's always great to get you. Yes, sir. Always great to get you aboard. Thank you.
Thanks for having me as always, Greg. Glad to be on, and I'm happy to be talking some college hoops here.
I'm happy to have you aboard as well. And Sean, I was very happy that last week you did put out that article on some of your top mid-major teams in all of college basketball. Certainly, you gave some shine to some absolutely tremendous players that I do feel like need to get a little bit more of the limelight as well. But obviously, we want people to read that article. But just how did you go about picking some of the teams that you did write about in that article, and what sort of attributes do you look for in some of these top mid-major teams?
So I did two of them. For the first one, I wanted to go with teams that were like totally on the opposite spectrum, which was Louisiana Tech is an elite defensive team, but doesn't really score the ball consistently at all. And then the other one I wanted to look at was obviously Indiana State, who I believe is possibly the best mid-major team in college basketball right now because they are an elite offensive team. They're 10-1. They have a ton of talent. And so looking at those two is pretty interesting. And then for the second one, I just want to go with two teams with really good coaches that have a lot of talent, and that was McNeese State and Grand Canyon. So I was able to look at four really good teams. The first one is more stylistic based, and the second one is more based on talent and coaching. So looking at those four is really interesting to me. McNeese State, obviously the favorite in the Southland, even though there's some decent teams over there like New Orleans. I expect them to be fairly competitive, but McNeese State is head and shoulders above the rest of the pack in terms of talent. But Indiana State is a team that I don't think gets enough attention. I think they're starting to now, but everybody was so in on Drake and Bradley, and as they should. Those are still two really good teams. But when you look at Indiana State, they're 10-1. Sure, their strength of schedule hasn't been anything crazy, but they've played some decent opponents: Toledo, Southern Illinois, Bradley. They won all of those games. They beat teams by a lot of points. They don't play super close games against bad teams. And then when you look at the talent, you have Isaiah Swope, who's just a dominant scoring guard. You have Ryan Conwell, who's a great shooter. You have Robbie Avila, who does a little bit of everything. Then you have a couple other guys like Julian Larry and Jason Kent, who can shoot it from outside. And then you add Aaron Gray, the multi-time transfer, who's now eligible. So you just have a lot of different pieces, and all of them fit the mold that Josh Schertz wants his team to play under. So I just think Indiana State, all of those ingredients make me think they have enough to make a deep run in the NCAA tournament if they're able to get there.
Yeah, both of those teams have been incredible. Indiana State, they didn't get a cover on Saturday against Ball State, but they still showed out really well. This team has been nothing short of incredible in terms of their offense. And then with Louisiana Tech, the fact that they've got Daniel Baccio in the fold is big as well. They were without him the first 2 or 3 games of the season. His acquisition has been absolutely massive for this team, as Sean Paul, who does absolutely tremendous work over at Action Network and the Field of 68, is joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And those are two mid-majors that really do stand out to me. And Sean, you, much like myself, are out west, so you do get to see a lot of these West Coast teams. And what have you made out of some of the more mid-major teams out on the West Coast? And this does include the Mountain West, because there's always sort of demarcations as to what is not a mid-major team. But I've been highly impressed by a lot of these teams out here, especially the Mountain West teams. And I do think that there is a good case to be made that a lot of the best, shall we say, non-Power 6 conference is actually being played on the West Coast.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Utah State is a team that doesn't quite get enough attention. They're 11-1 right now. Their only loss came on a road environment against Bradley. They have a win over Akron, a win over UC Irvine, a win at Santa Clara, a win on a neutral against San Francisco. And they've shown the ability to win offensively and shown the ability to win defensively, which is really good. They're just steady on both ends of the floor. Danny Sprinkle was more of a defensive coach at Montana State, and he's brought a lot of that over too. You have Darius Brown, who leads the country in assists. You have Gray Osibor, who's a dominant post player. But I'm glad he finally got shut down in a game, which was against Santa Clara, so we could see how they score when he's not going. They put a lot of attention on him. Santa Clara has a ton of size, so I figured that might be a tough matchup. He had 9 points on 3 of 14 shooting, 5 turnovers. Just a bad game for a player of that caliber. But Ian Martinez, a transfer from Maryland, started his career at Utah, had 28 points. So they have other options that can step up when Osobor isn't putting up crazy numbers, and I think that's a sign of a really good team. They have pretty good depth. Khalifa Sacco the other day got the game winner against San Francisco. That was a really low-scoring game. Both were in the 50s, and he was able to get the putback for the victory. So they just have a lot of different guys who play their roles, make big plays when it matters. They have a lot of experience. So I could see this Utah State team making a run and possibly being in the NCAA tournament if they do get some big wins in conference play. I mean, the opportunities are there. You look at their KenPom upcoming schedule. They have Colorado State coming up on January 6th. They have New Mexico on January 16th in the pit. You have Boise State shortly after that. You have San Diego State, Nevada, and Boise in a 3-game stretch. So they really have to capitalize on some of these games, but they have enough opportunities to make the NCAA tournament with some big wins if they're able to capitalize.
Yeah, I'm so with you on Utah State. I love what I've seen out of this team. Like, Great Osobor last year was a solid player that was putting up, 9 points, 5 rebounds per game. And I was thinking, all right.
Behind Jabril Bello, though.
That is very true. And Bello was absolutely tremendous. One of the best defensive players in mid-major college basketball, in my opinion, last season. But the way that guy has flourished, I was not expecting quite that sort of a leap, but that's been big. And a lot of people forget about Darius Brown as well. That guy's assist-to-turnover ratio is one of the best in all of college basketball. I absolutely love his game, man. I also love the analysis that we get out of Sean Paul. He does great work over at the Field of 68 along with Action Network. And he's trying to be right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And we're doing this in preparation of the Tuesday card. But just looking back at what we did see over the weekend, because we saw a rambunctious day of college basketball on Saturday that involved Baylor getting their doors blown off. We saw 121 points from UC Irvine to wrap up that Saturday. We saw a lot of great college basketball. Just out of everything that we did see over the weekend, was there a few results in general that did catch your eye and did maybe cause you to rethink a team a little bit, whether that be to the positive or the negative?
Memphis, my thoughts haven't necessarily changed, but it's good to see them get a win of this caliber over a top 15 team in Clemson who has a win at Alabama. They have some really key wins this season, and there was no reason that Memphis should have been unranked entering this game. It should have been a ranked game. But now there's no reason they shouldn't be inside the top 20. This team is really good. They add Naquan Tomlin, who didn't even play in this game. And then you have Javon Quinterly, who's been really solid. David Jones looks like an All-American with the way he's able to score the basketball. And I don't think it's that far-fetched to say that Jones is the best scorer that Penny Hardaway's had at Memphis. I mean, he's had some solid ones, but has there been anybody that he's had that's looked this comfortable and made the caliber of shots he does? I really don't think so. He's been a terrific ad for them. They have a ton of talent. I think this is a top 15 team moving forward, and they might end up being better than Florida Atlantic. You also look at Michigan State. They beat a really good Baylor team who hadn't lost this year. Tyson Walker did Tyson Walker things. We know he's going to put 20-plus up pretty much every day. But the biggest thing for me was the ease at which they scored with. I mean, 63% from the field. They missed 18 shots in the game. They went 8 for 12 from 3. So they know their strength is not three-point shooting. That's obvious. Tyson Walker is the only guy on the team that looks to have any kind of pulse from outside right now. But A.J. Hoggard got into the lane a little bit, made some things happen. He still struggled for the most part, but Trey Holloman came in and made some plays off the bench. They just need some contributions from those kinds of guys. Xavier Booker came in, had 7 points. Cohen Carr made some really important plays on both ends. I'd like to see his role grow a bit. Jaden Akins, though, is the guy for me moving forward that just needs to step up. You can watch him, and you're like, that physical talent is there. It's been there since the day he stepped on campus. He was a top 100 recruit, shot 42% from 3 last year. Just looks like his confidence is completely zapped from outside right now. He shot 38% from 3 as a freshman, 42 last year, and he's at 30 this year. He needs to find a way to get going because I don't think Michigan State can reach its ceiling until Akins gets rolling and is better than a guy that's just another piece, because he could be a 15-point per game guy. He's just not there right now. And there's a reason Michigan State hasn't missed an NCAA tournament in over 20 years. I mean, Tom Izzo figures out ways to win. I think his way to win here is just find ways to score inside, defend, and the rest will come to you if the shooting eventually turns around. But it's not like Michigan State has comfortably been in the tournament the last couple of seasons. They were in the first 4 a few years ago when they played UCLA. They led during that game, and then UCLA ends up going to the Final Four. It hasn't been as comfortable as we're accustomed to during the Cassius Winston days and previously, but they always find a way to get to the tournament. I don't think this year's any exception.
Yeah, I do think that it's going to be really interesting to see what we get moving forward out of those teams. And to your point about Memphis a little bit earlier as well, that was a massive win. And we always talk about how players turn the corner. I talked about this a little bit on the podcast. I still don't think that Penny Hardaway is like your number one coach in all of college basketball or anything like that, but I do firmly believe that coaches can turn a corner as well. Heck, I think we've seen it with Danny Hurley over at UConn, and I do think that Penny Hardaway has done a whole heck of a better job last 18 or so months at Memphis than he did previously in his tenure. And we are seeing some coaches coming to the forefront. And over the last few years, I do think that Penny Hardaway has been one of the most improved coaches in all of college basketball.
That's a great take. So Jeff Goodman, obviously, he put out a really good piece on the Messenger about Danny Hurley, a feature on Danny Hurley and the way he changed his recruiting style after they lost to New Mexico State. He went from having all those big athletes and they're going to out-tough you and they were a great defensive team, but can they score? That was always a question with his early UConn teams, and that's why they never got as far as they could have. The next year, he gets a bunch of shooters. They win the national championship, and it's the same deal this year. For Memphis, it's the same, but not with how they really play. It came down to Penny Hardaway with realizing what wins you games in college basketball, and that is old, experienced players. He went and wanted to get a bunch of young dudes right away. He got Boogie Ellis. He got James Wiseman. He got that crazy recruiting class that ends up turning into nothing. And, that was not a good team at the end of the day. And they had a bunch of NBA players on it. Even though Wiseman played like 3 games, they still had Precious Achiuwa and all these other guys. And then I think now we're seeing the way he attacks the transfer portal. You look at this team, it's filled with transfers. David Jones, Quinterly, Caleb Mills, Naquan Tomlin, Nick Jourdain, Jordan Brown if he's ever not sick or whatever's happening there. So you have all these guys, they're experienced transfers. Penny Hardaway found out what wins you games in college basketball. It's experience and experienced talent, not just a bunch of old guys who can't hoop, a bunch of old guys who can hoop and have won at this level before. So Penny Hardaway's really found out how to win, and it needs to translate to tournament success here sooner rather than later because they still only have 1 win during his NCAA tournament career. I think this team could get to the Sweet 16, though. That talent is legitimate.
It is very legitimate, and I do think that with what we've been seeing, it has been really just a little bit more efficiency in general. Things are a little bit more under control, and that's just so massive for a team with all that talent. As Sean Paul, who does tremendous work over at the Field of 68, is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Sean, certainly we're going to be seeing a lot of this for the next week or two, as well as I know that you've been doing a great job with your picks over on Action Network, and that's these home teams not necessarily having sellouts. And I will say, on Tuesday, we actually are going to be seeing some Big East action with Georgetown versus Butler. I do think that one of the biggest games of the day is certainly going to be involving a team we were just talking about, Memphis versus Virginia, but obviously we've got that Marquette game as well. I believe that they're playing against Providence. And how do you take a look at home court advantage this time of year? Because with a lot of kids on break, with a lot of kids just having finished up finals, I don't know if it means the same as it will after January 1st, where you're going to get the kids back on campus. And I feel like we saw it a lot last year where a lot of these big favorites, they fell at home when it was like the week before Christmas and a lot of kids were off campus.
I think in general, this time of year is tough because this week was finals week. This upcoming week is going to be Christmas break starting. We saw a bunch of really good teams fall at home. Marquette barely squeaked past St. Thomas. So I think we're seeing this last couple weeks stretch be a really difficult one in general. I want to see how teams fare at home, but you're right. It is different not having the students because students, regardless of if a team is good or not, they're going to show up. They're going to be loud because that's what college students do. I think it really depends on the team, though, because a Memphis, they shouldn't really be affected by that. They've been there. They're old. They played a lot of college basketball. I don't think that could affect them as much as a younger team. So if you're looking at a younger high major team that maybe gets amped up by the crowd more, I think that's something to look at. I don't think Memphis will necessarily be affected by that. But there's a lot of teams here like Ole Miss. How will they fare not having the home crowd there against a decent Troy team? I don't know. I mean, Ole Miss has played a lot of close games this year. We'll have to see. I think Providence is probably the one that it really stands out for, though, because of how rowdy their student fan base is against a really good Marquette team. If the students were there for that game, with how good Marquette is and how good that fan base is, you wouldn't be able to hear anything in that arena. But it's probably going to be a lot different with no students there. So I'm expecting Marquette to feel a little more comfortable going into that environment without the students there.
Yep, I do think that that's big because, as they always call it, the Dunkin' Donuts Center,
Hmm.
because I think they're trying to call it like a Mika Pavilion or something like that. Just
Yeah,
ridiculous. It's a
I don't
dunk.
care.
It's a
Yeah,
dunk.
that's
We
not it.
all know that it is, but that
Yep.
said, it is one of the best environments in all of college basketball. I do think that that is a very proper take there, and I do think that it is going to be interesting to see how Marquette is going to be able to fare in that one. And we talked a lot about Memphis and the marquee game of the day. I do really feel like is that Memphis versus Virginia game, but how do you take a look at the flip side with Virginia? Because one thing that stood out to me about Virginia is that this is a little bit of a new look defense in that they're creating so many more turnovers than a season ago. And if they're able to continue to be able to generate these turnovers, I do think they need to get a little bit better on the glass, but this could potentially be a dangerous team in the ACC.
It's definitely different because the pack line defense traditionally is not bringing in turnovers. Their best turnover rate under Tony Bennett is about 20%. They're at 23% this year. They're a number 2 defense nationally in college basketball, but their offense still has not been that good. They're 115th in offensive efficiency, and they barely snuck past Northeastern, the 208th ranked team in KenPom the other day. The biggest reason for me, though, why their defense is so much improved in forcing turnovers is the length of Ryan Dunn. He's one of the best defenders in the country, and he gets a ton of block shots, gets a ton of steals. Just the way his length and athleticism is able to get into passing lanes and affect the game, I think has really changed how this Virginia defense operates because they really haven't had a player with his skill set in a long time. I can't even name the last one. Like DeAndre Hunter obviously had the length and the size, but he wasn't an athlete and he was a better scorer than Ryan Dunn. You have 2 dudes in Ryan Dunn and Reese Beekman who are just absolute all-out defenders. They're going to go out for every loose ball. They're going to try to force turnovers. So I think the emergence of those 2 together has really been the turning force for this defense being an elite turnover team. But they need more offensively from Andrew Rode. That's really what it comes down to for me. He had 6 assists and 0 points and no turnovers the other day against Northeastern. That's fine for most teams, but this team is not good enough at scoring the basketball to where that's going to work. They added him to score the basketball, and he's averaging 6 points per game. They need him to step up in a major way in a road environment. No students, I know, but a road environment against Memphis, a ranked team. Virginia hasn't really impressed me a ton this year. I love Ryan Dunn. I love Beekman. They need to show where that scoring is going to come from if they're able to be a legitimate top 25 team moving forward.
Yep, I do think that they need to show that prowess as well, and I think that that is going to be a tremendous matchup between Virginia and Memphis, 2 teams that do have some opposites to them. And then, is there any other games for Tuesday that are really catching your eye? We are doing this without really having any betting numbers up on the board, so it's a little bit hard to speculate on some of these spreads. But is there another game or 2 that you do have starred and you want to just see how these teams fare, whether it is a team that you're feeling a little bit more bullish on, or maybe it's a team or 2 that you have some questions with that you want a few more answers from?
Yeah, obviously. I mean, Lindenwood against Missouri State. No, I'm kidding. The one I'm really looking at, there's 2 for me. One is Florida against Michigan in the Jumpman Invitational. Michigan is such a strange team to me. Obviously, you have the Juwan Howard thing going on that's been a bit of a distraction. But this team went on the road and beat Iowa, and I don't think Iowa's very good, but that's a road win in the Big Ten. Those are not easy to come by. They scored 90 points. But the biggest thing for this team is they need to be able to defend, and it's not like they don't have the pieces where they can defend. They just have to be better at communicating, show more effort on that end. And I think they will be a decent defense at the end of the day. But with how good that offense is, they can be a NCAA tournament top 25 level team if they just get enough stops. Doug McDaniel has been terrific. Olivier Kamwa has been really good, streaky at times, but mostly really good. Namari Burnett's shooting close to 40% from deep, as is Terrence Williams Jr. Trey Jackson has been mostly a non-factor. Will Shetter is shooting 66% from 3 on 18 attempts. I like this Michigan team. I do. I just don't know what I'm going to get from them on a night-to-night basis because they're allowing 86 points to Oregon without Nafali Dante and Nathan Biddle. And then the next game, they're beating Iowa on the road. You just don't know what you're going to get from this team. They can't comfortably play with the lead because they don't get enough stops. They're seemingly always playing from behind, which tires out your offense at the end of the day. And if you're not getting stops to begin with, then it's going to be a long day. But they have a really big opportunity here against a Florida team that is 7-3, 38th in KenPom. Florida lost its 3 games that were against high major opponents. They beat Pittsburgh and Florida State, but they lost to Baylor, Virginia, and Wake Forest. It's an interesting team. I like Florida. Again, I also don't know how I feel about them if Riley Kugel isn't being the guy that a lot of people thought he could be. He hasn't been a good shooter this year, and he was a really good shooter last year. He's a great athlete, but he needs to be able to hit the outside shot a little bit more consistently. I think he needs to be this team's number one option, not Walter Clayton Jr., even though I love Walter Clayton. I think Riley Kugel needs to be your number one guy at the end of the day if Florida wants to get where they can be, which is a single-digit seed in the NCAA tournament. So this is a game between two teams that I think are trying to find their identity and find how they can be really good and make the NCAA tournament, because I don't think we know enough about either team yet, even though we're 6 weeks into the season.
Absolutely. I do think that we need some more answers on that front, and a man that always has great answers, a man that does a great job looking at this game is you, Sean. You do absolutely incredible work over at Action Network, coupled with that Field of 68 as well, looking at their mid-major shows. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people are able to follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at SeanPaulCBB. I talk college hoops on there pretty much all the time. If you have any questions and want to see my thoughts, you might disagree with them, but I'll answer your question 99% of the time. The mid-major show with Brian Burton and myself on the Field of 68 weekly. Make sure you tune into that. I do some stuff for the Field of 68 daily, the newsletter. I write there once a week, so make sure to subscribe over there. My stuff on the Action Network, I put out a good amount of previews each week for games, so if you want to tail my picks, go ahead. They did 3-2. I did 5 previews on Saturday. 3-2 is not too bad. That's a winning record. I would be the best hitter in Major League Baseball history if that were the case. On Sunday was Seton Hall over Missouri, so let's see what we get there.
Giving us so much is Sean on the college basketball front. He does an absolutely amazing job, and it's always great to get him aboard. A big thanks to Sean for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VC Family Podcast. And coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Tuesday as we get some big shots. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VC Family Podcast. It is always great to be joined by Sean Paul, who does amazing work over at the Field of 68 along with Action Network, taking a look at all 362 teams, whether they're big, whether they're small, whether they're in the middle. He does a great job breaking it all down every single time he joins this podcast. Always does a good job of making us just a little bit smarter. So big thanks to Sean for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast to give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Tuesday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that as per usual, any changes are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at unit_81. We are going to be going in Las Vegas rotation order, which means that we're going to go with the games with the bigger conferences up top, and then the games involving these conferences are going to be at the bottom. That would be any independent teams, the Atlantic Sun, the Southland, the America East, the Northeast Conference, the SWAC, the MEAC, the Big South. So that'll keep things nice, clean, and easy, and we get things started with 601-602 on the betting board. It is Bowling Green playing us Hampton, and Hampton does find themselves as an underdog of 11 points with a total between 150 and 151. I set Bowling Green as a 13.5 point favorite. I'm going to be one to lay the number. Just have a lot of faith in general in Todd Simon as a coach. He's done a really good job with Bowling Green. Brought in his big man from Southern Utah, Jason Spurgeon, who's been able to do a solid job, along with Rashawn Agee of being able to pound the glass. These two guys are combining for about 13 or so rebounds per game. It is a little bit of a work in progress from three-point range for Bowling Green, but they are facing off against a Hampton team that, well, they have not been able to get a whole heck of a lot going themselves. They lose Russell Dustin in the offseason, which I don't honestly think was the world's biggest loss. He was a little bit of a ball hog, but you can tell that this team just has not really been able to find it on offense in terms of points scored on a per-possession basis. This has been one of the least efficient offenses in all of college basketball at 292nd. And Bowling Green, they still have a little bit of work to do. They're more around 230th with this regard, but you can tell that just game by game, this is a Bowling Green team that has been able to improve quite a bit, and you just can't say that right now about this Hampton team. Hampton is a top-heavy team that now gets Jordan Nesbitt back to the fold, and that is big because he was really their top scorer with about 16 points per game 8 seasons ago. That'll help out Tedrick Wilcox to be able to log about 15.5 points. That shot about 39% from three-point range, but for Hampton, they just don't do the little things well. They're turning the ball over 15 times per contest. They don't necessarily have the world's greatest, shall we say, decision-making when it comes to the shots that they are taking. They have been able to get quite a bit out of Tristan Maxwell now that he's been back in the fold to be able to deliver about 10 points per game, but you really only have one true rebounder as well in Kyrie Smallin, who's been able to do a solid job, giving you about 9 or so rebounds per game, but with Nesbitt still not looking 100%, even though he's returned to the fold with the way that you've also had Marcus Hill on the flip side for Bowling Green give you 20 points, nearly 2.5 assists per contest for a Bowling Green team that has done a good job taking care of the ball. They're only turning it over 11.5 times per game. Defense has been much improved with Bowling Green, giving up fewer than 70 points in 4 out of their last 5 games. I do think that Bowling Green is going to be able to take it to a Hampton team that likes to play quite up-tempo. This is a Hampton team that they rank at the top 50 nationally in terms of total possessions per game. Todd Simon at his core is a little bit more of an up-tempo coach, so I do think that we get some scoring in this one. So my total 153.5, but I do think that Bowling Green wins this game by double digits. That Bowling Green is a 13.5 point favorite, so want to lay the number and going to be taking a look at the over. 603, 604 on the betting board. Samford, it's the road face-off against Valparaiso. Valparaiso finds themselves as an underdog of 9.5 points, and your total on this game is anywhere between 155 and 155.5. I made Samford the 11-point favorite, so going to be willing to lay the number. Now with Samford, they commit all sorts of fouls and they draw all sorts of fouls. Their games are involving just a whole bunch of free throws as of right now. It's been quite hilarious to take a look at. As for Samford, they're averaging about 22.5 free throw attempts per game. They've got Ryland Jones doing a really good job of being able to dish out the ball as well. It comes in from Utah State, and Utah 4.5 assists, so 1.5 turnovers per game. Team has been dealing with a little bit of an injury to Jeremy Marshall, who was out of the fold towards the beginning part of the season. 6'6" combo player that's able to shoot 43.5% from three-point range. Getting him back has made an already explosive Samford team all the more explosive. They were held down to begin the year against Purdue, but really past that, this team has been a bulldozer in terms of scoring. 99-plus points for Samford in 4 out of their last 5 games. They've also given up at least 80 points in 4 of those last 5 as well, and it is a case of something's got to give, because for Valparaiso, this team has not broken the 70-point plateau at all this month, and as a matter of fact, their high water mark of the year in terms of scoring is 71 points when they went up against Southern just before Thanksgiving. So it has been a rough Valparaiso team to say the least. They do have someone in Darius DiViero who's actually done a good job of doling out the ball. How about 5.2 assists to 2.5 turnovers per game, but it only gives you about 5.5 points per game. Isaiah Stafford is 17.5 points per game. Right now leads the way for a Valpo team that they do only turn the ball over about 11.5 times per game. That's a good thing for this team, but you've only got one player, Jackson Edwards, that gives you north of 4.6 rebounds per game. That's where you're really able to get this Samford team, because they don't have much other than anchor down low. So maybe we give you 14.5 points, 6.5 boards, and that is quite a name. First name anchor, last name anchor, but I mean, it's been anchoring just the overall play that you've got for this team. You've got so many different guys for Samford that give you 12 plus minutes. They do a great job of being able to generate nearly 12 steals per game. I think that this is just a style that Valparaiso is not used to, and Samford has been able to speed up every single opponent that they've been playing. Valparaiso has slowed down every opponent that they have been playing, so it is a case of something's got to give, but I just lean to this style of Samford. I think that they're just overall the better team, and they're going to be able to exert their will on this Valparaiso bunch, so I did set my line at 11. I'm going to be willing to lay it with Samford, and did set my total 157. I do think that Samford's up-tempo style, because there is so much fouling, it is going to lead to a lot of points with the clock stop, which allows me to take a look at the over. So going to be looking at the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay it with Samford. 6-5, 6-6 on the betting board. It is the Citadel on the road facing off against Notre Dame, and Notre Dame is a favorite of 8.5 points. Your total is between 127 and 128.5, and with Notre Dame, I did set them as a favorite of 9 points. So here at the 8.5, it's a max, so I'm going to be willing to lay, but I'm going to be willing to lay it. We have seen the Citadel team really slow down ever since Ed Conroy came into the fold, though. Now we have seen the offense be able to tick back up a little bit, 70-plus points scored in now each of their last 4 games, but I do think that for the Citadel, they're going to have a little bit of a tough time with the overall athleticism of Notre Dame. You do have Quentin Malora-Brown for the Citadel team, giving you about 9.5 points, 9.5 boards per contest, and he's helped out by Winston Hill, who comes in for Presbyterian. He's been able to do a nice job compiling about 7 rebounds per game down low, but it is a Citadel team that has some weaknesses in the backcourt. It's very top-heavy backcourt, as you've got Elijah Morgan, A.J. Smith combining for about 28.5 points. You've been able to get about 4 rebounds per game out of both of these guys, and they're combined to shoot about 43.5% from three-point range. After that, there's just a big giant fall-off with nobody else in the backcourt, giving you north of 4.5 points per game. You need a little bit more help from some of these guys. Madison Dewar has been able to step up about 9.5 points per game out of him, but for Notre Dame, like the way that Marcus Burton has been able to go into takeover mode quite a bit. A little bit of a shorter guy who's able to just make plays with the ball. He's not going to give you a whole heck of a lot of three-point shooting, but he's going to be able to get other guys open in space. He's done a nice job logging about 16 points, 3.5 assists, very much a driver to the rim, and that allows for open shots for someone like a Julian Roper, who's been able to shoot about 36% from three-point range. Notre Dame needs to cut down on the 13 turnovers per game, but we have seen this Notre Dame defense get progressively better as the season has went along. They did give up 72 points in that last game against Georgetown, but that was a game that went to overtime, so if you're looking in regulation and regulation only, teams have given up 65 points or fewer in 4 of their last 5 games. The lone exception going up against Marquette. Meanwhile, you do have a Citadel bunch that they themselves have been able to do a relatively solid job as well, giving up 68 points or fewer in now 4 out of their last 5 games. But I do think that Notre Dame is going to be able to do a relatively solid job on the glass. Tay Davis being able to give you right around about 6 rebounds per game is something that you do like to see. And even though this is a Citadel team that has really slowed things down, they are now outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game, which had you told me that 24 months ago, I would have been like, what in the world is this? It is still not necessarily the world's most efficient defense, as they are 186th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And I do think that Notre Dame is going to exploit the fact that the guards are allowing quite a few open shots from the outside. So I did set my total at a 129. We're seeing the Citadel tick up just a little bit, so I'm going to be taking a look at the over, and Notre Dame willing to lay up to 8.5 with them. 607, 608 on the bang board. It is Indiana. They play some Morehead St. Morehead St is a 12 to a 12.5 point underdog with their total between 142 and 143. Did set my line at a 12.5. So at the 12 that I'm seeing, that is a max I'm willing to lay with Indiana, but going to be willing to lay it with Indiana. It's been a Morehead St team that's had to deal with Mark Freeman being out of the fold, top scorer from the season ago. He's pretty much done for the year. So Riley Minix, who has come up from the non-Division I level, has had to be that main headline guy. So he's been able to log about 17.5 points per game. Now, it is a Morehead St team as a whole. They shoot 37% from 3. Minix has really been your weak link because among the top 5 scorers on this team, he's the only one of them shooting below 36.5% from three-point range. But Morehead State, as is typically the case with this team, they do find a way to be able to get some open looks, but it comes at the cost of turnovers. About 14 turnovers per contest. It's been a team that has actually done a really good job on the glass, by the way. Out of their top 6 scorers, you've got 5 of them giving you at least 4.4 rebounds per game, but they're going to meet their match against an Indiana team that they've got all sorts of size. The backcourt is a big question mark. Xavier Johnson has missed each of the last 4 games. Pretty sure that he's going to be missing this game as well, but we did see the coming of age of Trey Galloway against Kansas. Had a monster game, 28 points. Now, did come at the cost of 5 turnovers, but that was something that you wanted to see. And Khalil Ware has been absolutely tremendous down low for Indiana. 16 points, 10 boards, block and a half per contest. Now, the question is, who do you play alongside of him? Because Malik Ranu has good numbers with 14.5 points, 3 assists, but he doesn't feel like a great fit. Mackenzie Mbakpo, he's really had his struggles this year. I actually like what I'm seeing out of the likes of Anthony Walker. Whenever Peyton Sparks has gotten minutes, things have gone well for him. He's been a little bit of a scratch the last few games, so that's been a tad bit of an issue for this Indiana team. And I do think that ultimately the big key for this team is not going up against a demonstrative backcourt, which means that someone like a CJ Gunn can have a little bit more success in this game, be able to provide a little bit of scoring, not turn the ball over. That's big for an Indiana team that is very, very stout down low, has had a little bit of tough time in terms of being able to shoot threes, shooting only about 28.5% from three-point range. But once again, you've got a Morehead St team that they play very, very slowly, but it's not like they're any good on defense. This is a Morehead St bunch, and in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, right now they're checking in right around about 271st in the country, and it's not like Indiana's necessarily batting down the hatches in terms of their defense. We saw them against Auburn give up 100 piece. They're currently 190th in the country with this regard, but they are giving up 14.9 points fewer per 100 possessions when they are at home. Might not be the biggest solid in the world in this one, but so I do think that with Indiana now getting to at least 70 points for their last 5 games, they should be able to take it to a Morehead St team that, even though they play slowly, they're a team that has their issues with the turnovers, and they certainly have been missing Mark Freeman thus far this season. So I'm going to be willing to lay up to 12 with Indiana. I did set my total at 136.5. I do think that this is going to be a game that gets bogged down. I do think that the overall size of Indiana going to take it out of a Morehead St team that's been looking a little bit more down low and looking at some versatility to be able to get the job done. So looking at the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay with Indiana. 6-9, 6-10 on the betting board. It is Butler, and they play us to Georgetown. Georgetown does find themselves as an underdog of 10 to 11.5 points here total on this game, and between 150 and 151. I did set Butler as a 13-point favorite. This is a number that I'm going to be willing to lay. Georgetown's starting to take some strides forward. I like Ed Cooley as a coach, and clearly this is a Georgetown team that's a work in progress, but you got Jaden Epps who's able to deliver 19 points per game. He's been able to do a really nice job of also doling out the ball. 4+ assists in 4 of the team's last 5 games, shooting 41% from 3-point range. Problem has become, what are you able to do without him? Because last 2 games, he has been out of the fold, and with him out of the fold, Georgetown has actually performed quite well. They knock off Coppin State, which that's not saying much, but they go on the road, they knock off Notre Dame in overtime, and the big reason why they've been able to withstand the loss is Dontrez Styles has been the guy to really be able to step up for the team, but combined 29 points in those last 2 games. He's been able to shoot about 40% from 3-point range, and then you get Ismail Massoud back. So even though you do lose Epps, you get Massoud back. He's got good size at 6'9". He's currently shooting about 42% from 3-point range. That is a little bit of a matchup nightmare, but I do think that this is where the Epps injury really does hurt this Georgetown team, which Epps, he's not 100% out for this game, but even if he plays, you've got to figure that he's not going to be 100%. And for Butler, this team is efficient once again. Posh Alexander, you could tell that he was not a fit with Andre Curbelo. He gets to Butler without Curbelo. He looks like Posh Alexander once again. Not a great 3-point shooter, but gives you a 5.3 assists to 2.5 turnovers per game. Does a solid job being able to haul in there a few rebounds, and it's a Butler team that's shooting about 35.5% from 3-point range. The swagger with this offense is back. They're playing much more up-tempo. This has been a big relief for Thad Matta and company, as he's done a nice job being able to get this team back in the top 50, top 75 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. And they go up against a Georgetown team that they're still having their issues on that side of things. They're 87th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis when they are away from home. Georgetown scoring 17.7 points fewer per 100 possessions rather than when they are at home, and been able to get some good rebounding for this Butler team with Andre 3000 Screen along with Jalen Thomas combining for about 12 rebounds per game. It is a Butler team that has been a little bit of a work in progress in terms of their defense, but overtime sessions have really warped the defensive numbers of this team. They play that double overtime game against Cal. They played that overtime game against Texas Tech as well. So while the defense is still a little bit of a work in progress, it's not as bad as what it might appear. And this is still a Georgetown team that scored 71 points of fear in regulation in 4 out of their last 5 games. So it is a circumstance where I do think that Butler going to be able to do a nice job matching up down low. And I do think that with everything that you're dealing with in terms of the injury to Jaden Epps, it's going to take it out of this Georgetown team. And I do think that Butler is going to be a little bit more of a mid-tempo team moving forward. And I do think that the overtime sessions, they have sort of made their numbers look a little bit more demonstrative than what they are. So going to be looking at laying the points with Butler, set them as a 13-point favorite, and make my total 145. So diving under and willing to lay the number 6'11", 6'12 on the betting board. Michigan and Florida do battle from Charlotte. This is from the Spectrum Center, as Michigan is an underdog of 2 points, and your total on this game is anywhere between 158 and 158.5. And with Florida, I did set them as a favorite of 3 points, so I'm going to be willing to lay the number. I feel like there might be a little bit of an advantage for Florida with this game being out there in Charlotte, but a pretty neutral court, and I just do not like what I'm seeing out of Michigan as of right now. Michigan was looking like one of your top teams in all of college basketball. Things were truly rocking and rolling for them, and ever since then they have went 3-5 in their last 8 games, going up against the Florida bunch that they should be able to dominate down low. You've got 3 separate guys giving you at least 6.7 rebounds per game, as you got Micah Hanglot and Tyree Samuel, along with Alex Condon, all doing that. In terms of percentage of missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, Florida is a top 20 team in all of college basketball at that regard as well. And I mean, for Michigan, you do have quite a few guys that are able to hit the glass. Olivier Calma is able to give you about 7.5 rebounds per game, but his defense clearly not what it was while he was over at Tennessee, as Michigan well outside the top 150 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Now, Michigan, a very rock solid offense. You've got each of your top 5 scorers shooting at least 37% from three-point range. I will say, Will Shutter shooting 66% from 3. We should see a little bit of a fall off there. Something like, though, Doug McDaniel shooting 38% from 3. Olivier Kama shooting 37% from 3. I actually do think that this is a mainstay, especially with McDaniel giving you 18 points, 5 assists, and 2 turnovers per game. I mean, this is a good offense. And Amari Burnett, he's had his moments of greatness, sometimes disappears at times, but he's able to give you about 10 points per contest. But I do like the backcourt of this Florida team. You do have Walter Clayton, who has been turning the ball over a little bit too much with about 3 turnovers per game, but ever since Zion Pullen has gotten into the fold, he's been able to take a little bit more of a back seat, focus more on three-point shooting, as he's shooting 36% from the outside. And I do think that the Florida outside shooting is going to improve, as right now you've got Pullen along with Riley Kugel combined to shoot about 25 to 26% from three-point range. These guys are better shooters than that. It has been a Florida team that has been a little bit all over the place in terms of their defense, but it does feel like it's starting to get better. They've allowed 65 points or fewer in 2 of their last 3 games. For Michigan, offense just continues to be rock solid. They've been able to get to at least 75 points in each of their last 4 games, but the defense just continues to be ghastly. I do think that things could slow down a little bit in this one, as neither of these teams are playing at like some sort of an absolutely ridiculous pace. Florida is just inside the top 100 in terms of total possessions per game. Same goes for Michigan as well, and I do think that out there in the neutral court, some unfamiliar surroundings, it's going to take a little bit of time for these teams to be able to settle in and just be able to get their bearings with regards to outside shooting, which is why I did set my total at 153. I do think that the neutral court 5 plays a big role in terms of the total, so I'm going to be taking a look at the under. And with Florida, I'm going to lay up to 2.5 with them. 613, 614 on the betting board. Wright St is going to be playing with Miami of Ohio, and Miami of Ohio finds themselves as an underdog of 10.5 to 11 points. Your totals between 157 and 158.5, and with Wright St, I do think that they are the right side. I set them as a 12.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. As for Wright St, this team has a pair of guys, Trey Calvin and Tanner Holden, who are absolutely holding it down. These have been just 2 of the better scorers in the Horizon League over the last few seasons, with Calvin chipping in there right now, 22.5 points per game on 44% three-point shooting, and Holden, he's holding it down, 5 boards, 15 points. Then you do have the guys that are able to do a nice job down low in A.J. Brown, Brandon Noel, combining for about 12.5 rebounds per contest, and Noel at 6'8", he's been able to shoot 38% from three-point range. There's no question, this is a very good Wright State offense. Now the question is, what in the world are you going to get out of this defense? Because it is one of the lesser ones in all of college basketball. Wright State, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, a pretty brutal 330th. And for Miami of Ohio, are they a better and more efficient defense? Yes. Are they that much better? No. They're 240th in the country. And for this Miami of Ohio team, when they hit the road, it's just not been terrific for them, as in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they're giving up about 24.7 points more per 100 possessions when they are on the road rather than when they are at home. And I do think that even though Wright State is a little bit of a top-heavy team, they are getting a little bit more out of Andrew Wellage right now. It is a Miami of Ohio team that just doesn't match up very well. Darweshi Hunter, right now, your only guy that's giving you north of 8.5 points per game. He's shot about 38% from 3, 13.5 points per contest, and for Miami of Ohio as a whole, they're shooting about 38.5% from 3, but it's a rather low-tempo team that does turn the ball over nearly 13.5 times per contest and just have really no rebounding to speak of. Jaquel Morris has been able to give you 5.4 rebounds per game. That leads the way. You don't have anyone else that's giving you north of 4.4 rebounds per game. It's been a bunch of Miami of Ohio guys trying to step up and be able to give you a little bit more production like a Bradley Dean, and these guys just are not elevating this roster. It's Miami of Ohio bunch that comes in having given up 74 plus points in each of their last 4 games against Division I competition. Meanwhile, we've got a Wright State team that has been able to get to at least 80 points in now 3 out of their last 4. I think that Wright State is able to take it to Miami of Ohio in this spot, really speed this game up in a game where it's not going to be a ton of defense. I think that this is a little bit too high of a total just because Miami of Ohio is a little bit of a slower team and they're not going to be able to get second chances. So my total 154.5. So diving in on the under, both Wright State did set them as a 12.5 point favorite. So I'm going to lay it with Wright State, and I'm going to be taking a look at the under. 6 6:15, 6:16 on the betting board. Ole Miss is going to be playing us at Troy, and the men of Troy are an underdog of 12.5 points. Totals between 146 and 147, and with Ole Miss, I did set them as a favorite of 14.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay this number. It's a Troy team that is all of a sudden playing at a top 30 mark in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game. That double overtime game against Oregon State really did warp things quite a bit, though, and when it comes to Troy, you have to be questioning what you're going to be able to get out there in the backcourt, as Christian Eugene has done a nice job being able to dish out the ball, 16 points, 4 assists, so about 2.5 turnovers per game, but they go up against an Ole Miss team that now has reinforcements on the way. They get back moves to Cisse, who's already been able to give you about 7 blocks in his first 4 games, so that makes this defense all the more formidable. And then on top of that, Jamarian Sharp, the giant of the earth at 7'5", he's been able to give you 2.5 blocks per game as well. So Troy is really going to need to trust in their outside shooting because they're not going to be able to get a lot from the inside. And to the credit of Troy, they do shoot about 36% from three-point range. Each of their top 4 scorers have been able to shoot at least 36.5% from the outside. But the problem is that it comes with about 14.5 turnovers per game. On top of Eugene, you've been able to get in the neighborhood about 11 points per game out of Amir Muhammad, someone that stands right in the neighborhood about 6'1", has been able to chip in their 3 assists per contest. So I do like his overall game. And for Ole Miss, have they cut it close in a few of their games this year? Absolutely they have, but ever since Cisse has gone back in the fold, the defense has been improved a little bit, giving up 68 points or fewer in now 2 out of their last 3 games. You got a Troy team that has been able to do a nice job of being able to put points up on the board. This team has been able to score at least 70 points in every single game thus far this month. As a matter of fact, last time Troy was unable to get to 70 points, you have to go back to the 2022-23 campaign, but I do think that Ole Miss going to be able to take it out of them here because you do have Alan Flanagan able to do a nice job with 17 points, 7 boards. You've got an Ole Miss team that does a nice job in general of generating about 8.5 steals per game as a little bit of a lower tempo team, and a bunch that does a very good job of being able to rebound by committee with now having 5 separate guys. They're able to give you at least 4 rebounds per game. So I do think that Ole Miss going to be able to play this a little bit more defense-oriented. I did set them as a 14.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay with Ole Miss and did set my total 138.5. So diving under and going with Ole Miss, laying the number 617, 618 on the betting board. Memphis is going to be playing us in Virginia. Virginia is an underdog of 2.5 to 3 points, and your totals between 130 and 131. I made Memphis a 2-point favorite. Here at a 2.5 to a 3, I'm going to be willing to take the points with Virginia. Virginia has done such a good job of being able to generate turnovers, in the top 10 nationally in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. We talked about it a little bit with Sean, but Mr. Dunn has been able to get her done. As Ryan Dunn, he has been able to give this team right around about 2.5 steals per game now. Because he's the only guy on the roster that's really giving you north of 5 rebounds per game, that is a big liability with Virginia. Virginia is going to be able to not win the battle down low. That'll allow Memphis to be able to have a nice edge on the glass, and that's how I think that they're going to be able to win this game outright, especially having someone in David Jones who can go off for a triple-double. We've already seen it throughout his career. 20 points, 6.5 boards, shooting 38.5% from three-point range. He has been tremendous, and while 13 turnovers per game is not amazing, it's better than where Memphis has been in past years. Could maybe use a little bit more of a step up out of Caleb Mills, who's only been able to give about 9 points per contest. But, all these guys, they just know their role. They know how to play very effectively in general. I know that they've been dealing with the drama of Jordan Brown, which I'm pretty sure that he's now out of the fold for the team entirely. But got a lot of depth with Javon Quinterly doing a nice job being able to dish out the ball. But I do think that the overall efficiency of Reese Beekman is big, because I was talking about Memphis and their turnovers. You got a Virginia team that, because they are 362nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game, that is said last, they're going to turn the ball over less, but still, it's really good efficiency. Just 8 turnovers per game. Virginia is one of those teams that they both play slow and they're very efficient on the defensive side of things, as they're a top 25 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And I like what I'm seeing right now out of Leon Bond III, as he's been able to do a solid job with a combined 26 points in the team's last 3 games. He's been able to give you a few assists, a block here and there. He's been able to do a nice job of contributing. Isaac McNeely, he's really your designated 3-point shooter. He's shooting about 55% from the outside. Certainly think that there's going to be a little bit of fall off there, but even though I do think that Memphis wins this game outright just because they've got a little bit more down low, I do think that Virginia going to do a nice job getting this game at their pace. Memphis is wanting to play at warp speed. They've gotten to at least 77 points in each of their last 4 games. got a Virginia bunch that's allowed north of 65 points just once all season long, and I do lean to Virginia slowing down this game. I set my total at 128, diving in on the under, and getting north of 2. I'm going to be willing to take those points with Virginia. 619, 620 on the betting board. Indiana State plays us to Tennessee State, and Tennessee State does find themselves as an underdog of 16.5 to 18 points, and your total on this game is anywhere between 155.5 and 157. I did set my total at 154. I'm looking at the under with Indiana State. This team has been one of the most masterful and efficient offenses in all of college basketball. They certainly are playing very fast under Josh Schertz, and the way that he has really transformed this program has just been remarkable. As Indiana State really did not have a lot of offense prior to him coming in. He's brought in a bunch of D2 guys, and right now Indiana State number 10 in all of college basketball in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, going up against the Tennessee State team that ranks 229th in this category. But I said Indiana State as a 14-point favorite. I do think that Tennessee State going to be able to hold up a little bit more in this game than a lot of people expect. Now, I don't think that they're going to be able to win this game outright or anything like that. It is a Tennessee State team that is going to be fighting a little bit of an uphill battle down low. E.J. Bellinger, the transfer from Belmont, has really been your main man down low. 12.5 points, 5.8 boards, and he is shooting about 41% from three-point range. When you do have Christian Braun out there, you've got some relatively good outside shooting as well, and after Braun was missing a little bit of time towards the beginning part of the season, he's now been cleared, and he's been an elevator for this team. 16-plus points in each of the team's last 5 games, doing so all while committing 2 turnovers or fewer in every single game. They have to deal with a little bit of an injury as well to Jason Thibodeau. He's been out really since Thanksgiving, so that has hurt this team a little bit more down low. But you've got really good backcourt play that I think is going to be able to stay in front of Indiana State. You've been able to get about 3.5 assists per game out of Jalen Jones. You've got Keenan Hodges, who comes in from Eastern Illinois, is a little bit of a do-it-all player with about 11 points, 4.5 boards, does a nice job of being able to stuff the stat sheet in general. You're looking at Canute Woods, the freshman, being able to step up as well. He's coming off of a really nice 10-point performance. And on the flip side, you've got an Indiana State team that has one of the most versatile players in all of college basketball. 6'10", Robbie Avila. Now that's a big issue that Tennessee State has. I don't know who guards him because he's able to give you 6 boards, 16 points, 4 assists, shoots it well from three-point range. He just has a skill set that is very rare in this day and age of college basketball, especially at the mid-major level. And then you've been able to get some good facilitation out of Xavier Bledson, Julian Larry. These 2 guys combined 7.2 assists to about 3.7 turnovers per game, and Indiana State currently shooting 40.8% from three-point range. It's a really good three-point shooting team with Isaac Swope leading the way, shooting 44% from the outside, 19.5 points per game. I do think that there's going to be a little bit of a drop-off here. Perhaps it's more like 38.5% from three-point range, but Tennessee State has been able to do an okay job of being able to guard the three-point arc. It's been a squad that has been a bit up and down in terms of their defense, but if you look at regulation and regulation only, because they played their game against Alabama A&M that went to overtime, they have given up now 75 points or fewer in pretty much 4 out of their last 5 games. Got an Indiana State team that, even though they were so good on offense last season, they were still a solid defensive team, and they've given up 72 points or fewer in 4 of their last 5 games. So I do think that we're going to see Indiana State cool off just a little bit from three-point range, which gives you a little bit of wiggle room on this under, and I did set my line at 14. I do think that Tennessee State does enough to be able to hold in there with the backcourt, so going to be diving in on the under and the points with Tennessee State. 621, 622 on the betting board. It is Cornell, and they're facing off against Siena. Siena finds themselves as underdogs between 15 to 15.5 points. Totals between 147.5 and 149.5. For Siena, they get back into the fold. Michael Ealy in their last game, and it still didn't make a difference. This team is right now looking like a bottom 10 to a bottom 15 team in all of college basketball. I wish I could put it any other way, but good grief. This is not great, and I set my line at a 15.5. Don't want to lay anything more than a 15, but I'm willing to lay the 15 as for Siena. What is this team doing well right now? They're averaging 56.5 points per game with 16.6 turnovers per game. They're shooting 24% from three-point range. You really only have one main guy that gives you north of 5.5 points per game that's shooting above 25% from three-point range. Michael Ivabero, who has come in, he's given the team 8.5 points, 6.5 boards as a true freshman. He's been a nice contributor, and Ely should be able to elevate the team a little bit. You take a look at what he gave you in the last game against St. Bonaventure. 6 points, 4 boards in 24 minutes. I do think that he's going to be back to more like 30-plus minutes in this one. And Zeke Tekken ends out with a little bit of an injury. He's been your main facilitator with 3 assists per game, but also gives you 3 turnovers per contest. Siena just getting absolutely cooked on the glass as well. So, I mean, it's it's really not great. Going up against a Cornell team where you're able to go about 9 to 10 deep. They don't necessarily have one guy that is going to be absolutely tremendous. Although Guy Ragland, give you about 6.5 rebounds per game. Nobody else on the team give you really north of 5, but Cornell just in tandem. They do a nice job shooting about 34 to 35% from three-point range. They themselves are going to get loose with the ball with about 15.5 turnovers per game, but the reason why they are going to have so many turnovers is because they are a top 75 team in terms of total possessions per game. It is a Cornell team that does live and die by the three a little bit, so there's going to be a little bit more variance in their games in general, but now they get to go up against a Siena team that not only are they bad on offense, but they're also 343rd in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage on defense. That is not great, to say the least. And Cornell just does a really good job of being able to dominate the outside in general, as on the road, Cornell is allowing opponents to shoot just 29.8% from three-point range. You've been able to have someone like a Cooper Morehead come in, shoot 46.5% from three-point range, to be able to give you about 12 points per contest. You've got so many interchangeable pieces for the team, as right now you got 6 different guys giving you at least 9.1 points per contest, and it's a very unselfish team. Out of your top 6 scorers, 5 of them give you at least 2 assists per game. This is a well put together machine that Cornell has been able to assemble. It's a Cornell team that has gotten to at least 70 points thus far this season. Meanwhile, Siena scored 56 points or fewer in 4 of their last 5. So it's a good old situation of something's got to give. Did semi total at a 147.5, so you're at the 149.5. I just don't think that Siena's able to do their part. Looking at the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay up to 15 with Cornell. 623, 624 on the betting board. It is Vanderbilt. They play us to Western Carolina. Western Carolina does find themselves as an underdog of 1.5 to 2 points, and your total is between 143.5 and 144. And with Vanderbilt, I did set them as a 4-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay this number. I do think that, much like we have seen with Vanderbilt teams in the past, after a slow start, we're going to be able to see this team ascend a little bit. Vanderbilt has had some very bad luck in terms of the injury front. Among their top 5 scorers, 4 of them have missed multiple games this far this season, but now they've got darn near everyone back in the fold. Ezra Magnon, the main facilitator, 15 points, 4 assists per game on a team that is only turning the ball over about 11.3 times per game. For all the injuries that they've had, that's not too bad. Now, Colin Smith was limited to 4 minutes in that game against Texas Tech. I'm thinking that there's a good chance that he's going to be out of the fold in this one. That's really a little bit of a backbreaker for the team, but Ben Allen Lubin, along Tyron Lawrence, have been able to combine for about 25 points per game. Are they shooting it amazing from three-point range? No, but you've got Tazos Camateros, the gentleman that comes in from South Dakota, who's been able to give you 6.6 boards, shooting 45% per three, and Jason Rivera Torres, the 6'6" freshman, has been able to shoot about 40% from three-point range as well, and has been able to really build himself up as well with 7+ points in each of the last 4 games. Got a Western Carolina team that is going to have the best player out there on the floor. That would be Vontarius Woolbright. This guy at 6'6" has been incredible. 21.5 points, 11.5 boards, 5.2 assists per game. He leads the team in all 3 categories. Problem is he only shoots about 30% from three-point range, and it is a Western Carolina team that they don't necessarily surround him with amazing shooting. Now, you do have a 40% three-point shooter in Russell Jones, who's been able to contribute about 11 points per game. All in all, Western Carolina does shoot about 34.5% from 3, and to the credit of Western Carolina, they take care of the ball, 10.5 turnovers per game. They are a little bit more of a low-tempo team, though, because they do run everything through Woolbright. They don't want to tire him out, so as a result, you do have a team that is outside the top 275 in terms of total possessions per game. Both of these teams, they do have their warts on defense. Western Carolina, about 164th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. This is a Vanderbilt team that they're currently clocking in right around about 256th, but I do think that with Vanderbilt, a lot of their metrics are warped a little bit by all the injuries that they've had, and with Western Carolina being a little bit more of a one-dimensional team, I do think that Vanderbilt going to be able to get it done, despite the fact that they're probably going to be without Smith in this game. So I'm going to be willing to lay up to 3.5 with Vanderbilt, and I did set my total at 136. I think that this is going to be a slow-moving slog of a game, so diving in on the under and going to be willing to lay with Vanderbilt. 625, 626 on the betting board. Stone Cold Stephen F. Austin is playing us to New Mexico State, and the Aggies of New Mexico State find themselves as underdogs of 9.5 to 10 points, with your total between 141.5 and 143. He said Stephen F. Austin as a favorite of 13 points. Going to be willing to lay this number with Stephen F. Austin. They just bring at you that psycho amoeba zone that I think is really going to pose for some issues with the New Mexico State team that has had a tough time taking care of the ball. 13.5 turnovers per game. It's a New Mexico State team that does shoot about 35% from three-point range, and the overall talent is honestly there. You've got Jalen Jackson Posey, who was actually with Stephen F. Austin a season ago. He was a 40+% three-point shooter. for them, who this season has been able to contribute about 10 points, 4 boards, 4 assists per game. Femi Odekale, he was a top scorer over at Pittsburgh a few seasons ago, was over at Citadel doing some nice things a season ago. 3 assists, 12.5 points per game, but once again, the turnovers. 4 per contest. That's towards the top of all of college basketball. And Stephen F. Austin, not without their awards. They're a team that they turn the ball over about 18.5 times per game. That's a top 5 mark to the negative in all of college basketball. But you've got a 45% three-point shooter in Matt Heyman. Even though they do turn the ball over quite a bit, they get the ball back. You've got Day Hall, who's been able to give you 10.5 points per game. The overall rebounding feels like it's a little bit better than Stephen F. Austin, even though they only have one guy that's able to give you north of 4.1 rebounds per game in Mr. Hall. But you've been able to have Christmas time and Krishan Christmas be able to give you about 6 points, 4 boards per contest. Overall, it's a Stephen F. Austin team has taken a little bit of a setback with their three-point shooting from a season ago. This year, they're shooting in the neighborhood about 34% from three-point range. But what's big for Stephen F. Austin is being able to get back on defense, being able to contest some shots. Doesn't sound like anything amazing, but now they're allowing opponents to shoot right around 33% from three-point range after a season ago. That was 34% from distance, because typically this is a Stephen F. Austin team that is a little bit all or nothing with regards to their defense, and with them being able to get back a little bit more, I do think that that is going to allow them to be able to take it to a New Mexico State team that you can tell they've got talent, but they don't have chemistry, because this is a completely new look team from season ago. They literally didn't return a single point from a year ago. So I did set Stephen F. Austin as a 13-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number, and did set my total 149. Stephen F. Austin, top 65 team in terms of total possessions per game, and New Mexico State, one of the most frequent fouling teams in all of college basketball. So I think you get a high-scoring game looking at the over, and going to be willing to lay with Stephen F. Austin. 627, 628 on the betting board. North Dakota State does hit the road face-off against Southern Illinois. Southern Illinois is between a 9 to a 10-point favorite, and your total on this game is between 135.5 and 136.5, and with Southern Illinois, I did set them as a favorite of 12.5 points. So we're going to be willing to lay this number with North Dakota State. It's a squad that just feels like they're missing something. They need to get a little bit more down low, and I do think that that is something, because you do have Andrew Morgan, who stands right around about 6'10", but he's not been able to do a great job of hitting the glass with about 4 to 4.5 rebounds per game. Do like the way that Bowden Scumberg, along with Damari Wheeler-Thomas, have played in concert in the backcourt. These two guys, a combined 26 points per game. Wheeler-Thomas, about a 39% three-point shooter that has become that main point guard for this team, and something that they badly needed. He's been able to give out a little bit over 3 assists per game, but Scumberg, he just feels like he's taken a little bit of a step back recently. He's had a combined 15 points in the team's last 3 games. Feels like he's just falling out of favor in general with this team. Now, one of those games was against Oak Hill Christian, where he only had to play 14 minutes. That was that infamous team that lost by like 90 points, and they just did not look like basketball players. So I'm going to call it what it is. But that's it for North Dakota State. They just do lack quite a bit of something down low, and it's a North Dakota State team that's gone back to the roots. They're playing much more slowly. They're outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game, but North Dakota State, once again, a very inefficient defense in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. The old Bison, 313th in all of college basketball. And the one thing that Southern Illinois is going to do, they're going to lock you down on defense. Southern Illinois, a top 150 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Southern Illinois, also a very slow team. You know that this team is not going to be playing very up-tempo, as they're well outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game. And for Southern Illinois, right now they've got one of the most supreme scorers in all of college basketball. Xavier Johnson leads college basketball, 24.8 points per game, 5.7 assists, shooting 43.5% from 3. Do I think there's going to be a little bit of a fall off? Yes, but I do think that he's starting to get a little bit more help from his friends. Clarence Rupert, part of that St. Peter's team that made the Elite Eight a few seasons ago, 7 boards, a block, 10.5 points per game. Been able to get a little bit of something with about 2.5 assists, 8.5 points per game out of Troy D'Amico as well. And then if you're able to get a healthy AJ Ferguson moving forward, as he's been out the last 5 games, I'm still thinking that he's probably going to be out the fold in this one as well, but he's getting closer to returning. That's going to be massive as well. And then you've also got a 38% three-point shooter in Jovan Stulic, who comes over from Little Rock, who's been able to do a solid job, giving you about 7.5 points per game. Even though Xavier Johnson is by far that main scorer, you've got like 5 or 6 ancillary pieces to be able to give you a nice rotation. It's a Southern Illinois team that all of a sudden has been able to play quite a bit better on defense. They've given up 70 points or fewer in now 4 of their last 5 games. And for the Southern Illinois team, they have given up north of 70 points twice this year, and that was to Indiana State and James Madison. no shame in giving up some points to those teams. And I do think that a North Dakota State team that has had a rough time with their defense all season long, they're going to have that once again in the spot, though I do think that both of these teams are going to be able to slow this game down quite a bit. I did set my total at 132.5. I just don't think you get enough possessions for and over. So looking at the under, and with Southern Illinois, I think that they execute with Johnson leading the way, willing to lay up to 12 points with them to go along with the under. 629, 630 on the betting board. Missouri State going to be playing with Lindenwood, and Lindenwood is a underdog between 16.5 to 18 points. And your total on this game is between 142.5 and 143. And with Missouri State, I did set them as a favorite of 21 points. I'm going to be willing to lay this number. Lindenwood has looked a little bit more respectable recently. We've got to give some credit where credit is due. They came up from the D2 level 2 seasons ago where they were a sub 500 team at the Division 2 level, and they've already reeled off 5 wins. That's an accomplishment for the team, and Lindenwood not looking as sorry anymore on defense. They've given up now 73 points or fewer in 4 of their last 5 games. Doesn't sound like a ton, but you know what? This is a Lindenwood team that at the beginning part of the season was just getting completely smoked. But I do think that they inevitably lose this battle on the glass, as with having David Ware currently out of the fold, you've got one guy that gives you north of 4.1 rebounds per game. That'd be Keenan Cole, who's been great. 18 points, 5.5 boards per contest, but it's a squad in general that is shooting 20.5% from three-point range. One player's giving you north of 4.2 points per contest. I have one guy shooting above 29% from three-point range, as you still don't have that main point guard for the team, Darius Bean, with 2 assists per contest. Is right now leading the way, and for Missouri State, they have cranked up their tempo. They're in the top half of the college basketball landscape in terms of total possessions per game. Still a top 50 team, though, in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis. After having Olsen Mason out of the fold for a few games, he's back, and he's been able to do a nice job with about 17 points, 3 assists per game. Now, the bugaboo for Missouri State is the 13.5 turnovers per game, but they should be able to win this battle down low, as they've got out of their top 6 scorers, 5 of them giving you at least 4 rebounds per game, including NJ Benson, who's been able to give you 7.8 boards, 2.5 blocks per contest, and then Donovan Clay, I think, is just an unguardable force, 15.5 points, 7 boards, 3 assists, shoots 38% from three-point range. It's a Missouri State team that does a very good job of being able to lock you down low for this Missouri State team. If they do have a little bit of a kryptonite, it is maybe the fact that they give up a few second chances, but they're 20th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. Lindenwood, well, they are currently about 184th, and for Lindenwood, it's actually been a case where on the road they're allowing opponents to shoot 29.7% from three-point range. So I do think that this is going to be a game that gets tied down a little bit, but Missouri State, they're able to attack you very well from within. With their upgraded tempo, they are able to blow out teams now quite a bit more than they were able to a season ago. So I did set my line at 21. Going to be willing to lay this number. I did set my total at a 137 with the way that Missouri State has been able to play on defense. So diving in on the under, and going to be willing to lay it with Missouri State. 631, 632 on the betting board. It is Providence. They play us in Marquette. Marquette finds themselves as 4 to 5 point road favorites. Totals between 144.5 and 145.5. I set Marquette as a 4.5 point favorite. We are in between my numbers, between a 4 and a 5. I personally would rather take 5 with Providence rather than lay 4 with Marquette. We have seen these home underdogs over the last about 10 or so days hitting at north of a 55% clip. And for Marquette, it's a very much improved defense. Last season had my question marks with it, but you can tell that with Marquette, this is a team that when they do leave home, they're just not quite the same team. And Dunkin' Donuts, it provides a very, very good home court environment for Providence. I know that they're calling it Amica Fieldhouse, but it's a dunk. Let's just call it what it is. But I mean, to my point about this Marquette team not being the same on the road, they're overall in the country about 47th of the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but they give up 9.8 points more per 100 possessions when they are on the road rather than when they are at home. And Providence, they're currently 9th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. This team has been absolutely tremendous with their defense. Now, you've got Tyler Kolek, who's really going to be putting that to the test. Tyler Kolek is able to give 15 plus points, 5 boards, 5 assists. He chips in there a seal. He has been nothing short of masterful for this Marquette team, but for Marquette, really other than Oso Ogudero, it's been solid, giving you about 6 boards. He's able to dole out the ball down low. You don't have anyone else that gives you north of 5 rebounds per game, and other than Kolek and Ogudero, nobody else gives you north of 3.5 rebounds per game. So I do think that Marquette is going to get cooked on the glass by a guy in Bryce Hopkins, who should see his shooting tick up as well. For Bryce Hopkins, right now 17 points, 8.5 boards, shooting about 24% from 3 after he was a mid to high 30s 3-point shooter a season ago. You've been able to have Josh Oduro really be able to step up as well. He's shooting north of 40% from three-point range after last year. That was more like 30%, so I do think that there's going to be a little bit of drop-off there, but 14 points, 6 boards out of him. They get Jaden Pierre back in the fold after he was missing for a few games due to injury. Now with Providence, they do need to cut down on the 14.5 turnovers per game, and one of the fortes of this Marquette defense has been generating those turnovers, but we have seen Marquette now give up 75-plus points in 2 out of their last 4 games. Meanwhile, it is a Providence team that they just continue to be rock solid with their defense. For this Providence bunch, they have given up 72 points or fewer in every one of their games thus far this season in regulation. They gave up 73 in an overtime game against Kansas State, which very, very understandable there. In regulation, they had given up fewer than 70 points. So I do think that for Providence, they are going to be looking at this game. They're going to play it a little bit more defense-oriented. It is a Marquette team that I do think is good to be able to put the ball in the basket themselves. They're a very good three-point shooting team, with even having your guys like a David Joplin coming in off the bench shooting some threes. But here at a 145.5, looking at the under, so I might total 144.5, and with Providence, I do think that they do a nice job of holding in there with their overall rebounding. Being able to get 5 points, going to be looking at Providence to go along with 145 or higher under. 633, 634 on the betting board. UC Davis is going to be playing against Montana. Montana is an underdog of a point, and your total is between 142.5 and 144 with Montana. I did set them as an underdog of 4.5 points, so I am going to be willing to lay this number. It's a UC Davis team that has one of the best scorers in all of college basketball in Elijah Pepper, who's been able to log north of 21 points per contest. Now, the biggest thing for this team is that you need a little bit more to go along with them, because while Elijah Pepper is doing an absolutely amazing job, you don't have anything down low. Pepper is right now leading the way of 4.8 rebounds per game, which is going to be an issue going up against Lalu Oke, who's been able to give you about 8.5 rebounds per game for this Montana team. But for UC Davis, you still do have guys that are able to shoot it from three-point range, as you've been able to get about 6 points, 4.5 boards out of Eddie Adebayo, who's been dealing with a little bit of an injury, has a chance to be able to play in this one as a 6'5", little bit of a combo player that comes in from England. And you have found the main Robin for this UC Davis team as well, and his name is Ty Johnson. Johnson a season ago had 14.5 points per game with about 2.5 assists per game, up to more like 16.5 points per game, but has really erupted late. How about a combined 58 points and 7 assists, along with 6 steals in the team's last 2 games as well. UC Davis, last year they were a top 100 team in terms of total possessions per game. They're down outside the top 250 this season because of depth outside of Pepper and Johnson. Not quite what it has been in past years, but for Montana, the outside shooting is not what it has been in past years. They're shooting just 29.5% from 3. Aiden Moody last year shot 40% from distance. This year, 15.5 points, but shooting just 31% from three-point range. That should tick up Deshaun Thomas, the combo player of 6'7", 6'8", that comes over from Colorado State, 8.5 points, 4 boards, shooting 40% from 3. But other than okay, you don't have a single other player on this roster that gives you north of 4.6 rebounds per game. That's a bit of an issue. And for Montana, what else is an issue is that they do allow opponents to shoot about 34% from 3. They rank about 200th in all of college basketball with that regard. And for UC Davis, it's certainly not a rough and tumble defense, but at the same time, with them not getting completely exposed on the glass, and with them having the best scorer in this game in Elijah Pepper, I do think that they're able to get it done. I do think that you're going to be seeing a little bit of a lower tempo game with the way that UC Davis has slowed things down this year. So I did set my total 138.5, diving in on the under. And UC Davis set them as a 4.5 point favorite. So want to lay with UC Davis and take a look at the under. 635, 636 on the betting board. Southern Utah is going to be on the road facing off against Montana State. And Montana State does find themselves as a favorite of 3 to 3.5 points with your total of 143.5. And with Montana State, I did set them as a favorite of just 2 points. So I'm going to be willing to take 3+ here with Southern Utah. Southern Utah has actually done a really good job with their 3-point shooting defense on the road. At home, they're allowing opponents to shoot 43+% from 3. On the road, this actually falls to 29% from the outside. I think that that's a big deal. They're going up against a Montana State team that should see some regression with their opponent 3-point shooting percentage. They're right now allowing opponents to shoot 26.7% from the outside. And this is a Montana State team that is going to be hanging their head on defense. That is really their forte, and I think that they're going to be a relatively solid defensive team. I don't think that they're this good of a defensive team. And when it comes to this Southern Utah bunch, you do have quite a few scoring options for the team, as Zion Young, who comes over from Western Illinois, actually played under Rob Jeter, who became the new coach this season. He's been able to find him once again. He had scored about 13.5 points per game many years ago for Western Illinois, was dealing with injuries, was dealing with just a lack of playing time in general, and now he's been able to work his way back up. He and Dominique Ford have been able to combine for about 20.5 points per contest. You've got Young shooting about 33% from three. Would like to see that tick up a little bit more, but Ford is shooting about 40% from the outside for a Southern Utah team has a little bit more up-tempo and only turning the ball over about 11.7 times per game. They're now finding a little bit of rebounding as well with Parasa Falah, the gentleman that comes in from Iran. He's been able to do a solid job of giving you about 5.5 rebounds per game. Flip side for Montana State, this team is really made up of Robert Ford having to do a little bit of everything. He at 6 feet tall, gives you 13 points, 8 boards, 3.2 steals, 2.8 assists per game on 42.5% three-point shooting. Such a good, versatile piece. The problem is you don't have a lot around him, as Patrick McMahon is a relatively solid scorer, but he's still dealing with a little bit of an injury. You've also been able to have Brian Goraki, who's been able to do a very nice job with about 15 points per contest, comes in from the non-Division I level and has lent some versatility for a Montana State team that does take care of the ball. 11.3 turnovers per game. They do a nice job generating about 9.3 steals per game as well, but with Southern Utah, they're doing a solid job of being able to take care of the ball. And for Southern Utah, I do feel like that 3-7 record is a little bit misleading, as this team has lost in their last 2 actual losses, both games by 2 points on the road. One of them was against Utah, so actually a very quality result. Meanwhile, for Montana State, when they've lost, they've been getting cooked, and this is a Montana State team that has a loss on their resume to Rocky Mountain College of the non-Division I level. It has not been so savory for this offense. They have scored 70 points or fewer in 4 of their last 5 games, with the lone exception being against a non-Division I team. So I did have to set my total lower at a 140. I just don't think that Montana State does their part with this total, looking at the under, and I do think that Southern Utah plays the coast once again. Anything north of 2 won't take the points with Southern Utah to go along the unders. 637, 638 on the betting board. UCLA is going to be playing against Cal State Northridge, and CSUN does find themselves as an underdog of 19.5 to 20 points, and your total on this game is between 137.5 and 138. 19.5 or more is my buy point on CSUN. I did set them as a 19-point underdog. You've got a UCLA team that, once again, is one of the best teams in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis. This is not your father's UCLA team in terms of offense, though, as they really have been struggling on that side of things. They lost darn near everything from last year in terms of backcourt, and for UCLA, currently 198th in the country in terms of points scored on a per-possession basis. Take a look at this Cal State Northridge team, and they play very up-tempo, and they're actually a more efficient offense right now than UCLA, which I find to be absolutely hilarious. Now, for UCLA, the defense is a whole heck of a lot more better, and this is a CSUN team that's a little bit of a work in progress under Andy Newman, who comes in from Division II Cal State Bernardino, but I like the way that he was able to bring back Deontay Bostic, Deshaun Ellen-Ikens, 2 big pieces from a season ago. These 2 guys were able to combine for 35.3 points per contest. Ellen-Ikens is able to give you about 6 rebounds per game, and this team is doing a really good job of rebounding by committee. Out of your top 4 scorers, 3 of them give you at least 6.2 rebounds per game. For a squad that does need to take care of the ball a little bit more, 15.5 turnovers per game. This is a UCLA team that doesn't generate the same amount of steals as they did a season ago, but they lock you down from 3-point range. They do a solid job down low with Adam Bona, along with Lazar Stefanovic, giving you combined about 12.5 rebounds per game. But for UCLA, they're shooting about 30.5% from 3-point range. Will McClendon is shooting 48% from 3-point range, but he's one of just 2 players that have made at least 1 3 that's shooting above 27.3% from the outside. That's a little bit of an issue. Now, I do love what the star freshman and Sebastian Mack has brought to this UCLA team. 2 steals, 2 assists, 4.5 boards, 13.5 points per game. Doesn't really give you a lot of outside shooting, though, and I think that this is going to be a game that becomes a little bit of a slog. CSUN is looking to play very much more up-tempo under Andy Newman. They have really cranked it up. Meanwhile, you've got a UCLA team that plays very low and slow. I do think that this becomes a little bit of a slowdown, but I just don't think that UCLA knocks down the shots to be able to get this total over. Semi-total 135, diving in on the under end at 19.5 or more, taking the points with CSUN. 639, 640 on the betting board, as Middle Tennessee is going to be on the road facing up against St. Mary's, and St. Mary's is a favorite of between 13.5 to 15.5 points. Total game between 118 and 120. Both these offenses are gross. Both of these teams well outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game. I think we went a little bit too far here on the total. I set my total at a 122.5, so I'm going to be taking a look at the over. You've got a guy in Ada Mahaney who's still able to take over a game with his scoring. For St. Mary's, he's been able to do a nice job logging 15 plus points per contest and still shot it well from 3-point range. Now the question is, can the rest of the guys around him be able to help out a little bit more, as Alex Dusas has been really that main contributor, as he's been able to log for the team about 9 points on 37% 3-point shooting, as Mahaney, he gives you about 3 assists per game, but Dusas also takes a load off a little bit as well, giving you about 4 boards, about 2 assists per contest out of him as well. And it is a St. Mary's team that does a good job down low. They've been able to get a combined 5 blocks per contest. Mason Forbes, Mitchell Saxon have done a nice job down low with that regard, with Saxon being your main rebounder with about 9 boards, 11.5 points per game. And for Middle Tennessee, the offense has just really gone sideways ever since Cameron Weston has been out of the fold, as he was looked to as one of the main offensive contributors for this team. Now it's had to be Elias King doing it all. 13.5 points per contest, shooting 37.5% from 3. Problem is, team as a whole, they shoot 28% from 3 with 13 turnovers per game, though. They still do a solid job of being able to generate some steals out of their top 4 scorers with Weston out of the fold. Still have 3 guys they're able to give you north of a steal per contest, but where I do think that Middle Tennessee is going to have a rough time is on glass. You've only got one guy that really gives you north of about 4.5 rebounds per game. That would be the 7.5 boards that you get out of Jared Coleman-Jones. But I just don't think that St. Mary's contributes enough scoring to be able to lay this sort of number. As I did set my number at a 12.5, it has been a Middle Tennessee team that has had their rough goes of it with regards to the offense, but it doesn't sound like much. They've scored at least 63 points in each of their last 5 games. Meanwhile, you got a St. Mary's team that has been able to ascend a little bit more with their offense as well. It did take double overtime for them in their last game against UNLV, but 64 plus points in now 5 out of their last 6 games, so they're starting to get it going a little bit more as well. And I think that it's going to be a low scoring slog. I think we've gone a little bit too far here, and I just don't think that St. Mary's should be laying quite this big of a number. So I did set my line at 12.5. I'm going to be looking at the points with Middle Tennessee, and with the total set mine at a 122.5, so going to be taking a look at the over. 641, 642 on the betting board. It is Western Kentucky, and in third face-off against Cal Baptist. Cal Baptist is a 2.5 to a 3.5 point favorite. Your total between 144 and 144.5. A little bit of a battle between the tortoise and the hare here, as Cal Baptist right now finds themselves outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game. Western Kentucky, in terms of total possessions per game, number 11, and I did sort of split the difference myself. I set this total at a 142, so I do favor the under a little bit more, just because this is a Western Kentucky team that has had a little bit of a tough time of getting shots to drop as well. They're shooting in that neighborhood about 29 to 30% from 3-point range, with Don McHenry and his 12 points per game leading the way for this team. You do have a Western Kentucky team that has done a nice job of being able to generate some steals as well. 8.3 steals per contest. Main man that has been able to help out on that front has been Tyrone Marshall. He's come in, give the team 8.5 points, 4.5 boards, right around about 2 steals per contest as a 6'7", do-it-all sort of player. And for Western Kentucky, the big question is, how are they going to be able to hold up on the glass? Because you got Ivan Odriogo, who began his career over at Nebraska, played a little bit of time over at Grand Canyon. He and Hunter Goodrick have been able to do a really nice job of pounding the glass for Cal Baptist. As for Odriogo, right around about 8.5 rebounds per game. Goodrick, 9 points, nearly 10 rebounds per game. So these two guys have been able to do a tremendous job down low, but you don't necessarily have a ton of depth with this team. You used to have the Armstrong brothers a season ago, which you knew that they'd be able to take the top off of a defense. And I will say, the 17 points per game that you're getting out of Dominique Daniels has been a nice way of being able to move on from that. But Cal Baptist is a team that they're very touch and go from the outside. You've got Blondo Chiqueno, who's been able to give you about 11.5 points per game. Brantley Stevenson, who comes in from Cal Poly, about 10.5 points per contest. And Stevenson is shooting 46.5% from 3-point range. But really, after your big three, there's a massive fall off there. Meanwhile, for Western Kentucky, they are a little bit more deep. You've got guys I think are going to be able to step up a little bit more, like a Deontay Allen, who in conference play was able to log double figures. He had a little bit of a slow start to the season from Jalen Jackson as well. Was not eligible because he was a 2-time transfer. Followed over as Coach Will Lutz from Texas A&M Corpus Christi. Since he's worked his way back, he's been able to give the team a little bit more facilitation. I do think that keeps things clean for a Western Kentucky team that I do feel like has a little bit of an advantage in the backcourt. They're going to be able to lose that battle down low, but with Western Kentucky currently 13th in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, Cal Baptist, they've been a relatively sturdy and stout defense themselves, but 285th in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. I think that keeps Western Kentucky in this game, so I did set my line at a 2, getting 2.5 to 3. Going to be willing to take the points with Western Kentucky, and did set my total at 142. I do think that this is going to be a game that gets slowed down, so looking at the under and looking at the points with Western Kentucky. This is the last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we hit the extra game. 643, 44. South Dakota hits the road to face off against Cal State Bakersfield. Meet for the Roadrunners, who find themselves as 3-point favorites. Your totals between 140.5 and 142. This is actually a rematch of a game that we saw about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, and in that game, South Dakota was able to get it done, 78-73. I do think that the script flips a little bit here. I did set Bakersfield as a 4.5-point favorite, so I do like them in a revenge spot, being able to lay this number. It is a South Dakota team that is going to have the best true rebounder in this game. Lat Thione has been able to give you about 9 rebounds, 14 points per game. Love what I've seen out of him, but you go back to that game that we saw a little bit over a week ago. In that game, Bakersfield actually did a really nice job winning that battle on the glass by kind of 38-30. Bakersfield got up 68 field goal attempts to the 49 of South Dakota. Now, South Dakota was able to take 14 more free throws. This is a Bakersfield team that is going to be quite a bit more aggressive than South Dakota, but we also saw South Dakota over the weekend get cooked to give up 121 points in that game against UC Irvine. Zot on that front. Now, for Cal State Bakersfield, one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball. This team is outside the top 300 in terms of total possessions per game. They're shooting 25.5% from three as well. I think that they're a better shooting team than 25.5%, and you do have a guy that's shooting 54.5%, and Dolph Pinupo, who's been able to give you about 6 points per contest, has been a little bit in and out of the fold, but since he's returned, he's been able to give the team a little bit of a shot in the arm in terms of their three-point shooting. But for Bakersfield, I also don't think that they necessarily dominate on glass the way that they did the first time around, but this is Concreves, who comes in from Creighton, is the only guy that gives you North 4 boards per contest, 6 points, 4 rebounds per game. But I do think that Bakersfield has a little bit more depth. You've got a bit more top-end scoring with regards to South Dakota, as you've been able to have Boston Holt come in from Utah, 11.5 points, 5 boards, shooting 42.5% for three. And all in all, it is a South Dakota team that does shoot 38.5% from three-point range, but also have turned the ball over about 13.5 times per game as well. It is a Cal State Bakersfield team that is a little bit all over the place with the way that they do play defense, as well as this has been a team that has been outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, despite the fact that they do play so slowly. So I do think that you're going to get a little bit of a slog game, but with Bakersfield, I do think that they're going to be able to do a little bit better job with this time around. The game being played at home, both of these teams do have some pretty demonstrative home and road splits. So I do look at this spot. I do think that Bakersfield gets their revenge in a game that I think is going to be a little bit less high scoring than we saw the first time around. Ref was very generous with the whistle in the first game, so did set my total at a 140.5. So here at 141, 142, going to be looking at the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay with Bakersfield, set them as a 4.5-point favorite. Now we hit the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-501, 306-502, Georgia Southern and Florida Gulf Coast do battle. This is going to be a neutral court game with Florida Gulf Coast between a 4.5 to a 5-point favorite, and your total on this game is between 141 and 143, and I did set Florida Gulf Coast as a 4-point favorite, so being able to get north of 4, I'm going to be willing to take the points with a Georgia Southern team that began the season 0-9 against the spread, but you know what? Things have been able to improve. They've covered their last two. By the way, this neutral court game is going to be played out there in the state of Georgia, so that does help out Georgia Southern in this case, even though it's not necessarily their just generic home floor. It is going to be a little bit of a booster for them and for Georgia Southern. You've been able to find a go-to scorer in Tyron Moore, who's been able to really help out this team recently. 30-plus points in 2 out of the last 4 games. He's really been able to give you a lot from the outside with 42.5% three-point shooting. Big for a Georgia Southern team that overall they're shooting about 33% from three-point range. Never been the biggest stan of Deuce Steen, as he puts up good numbers, but it feels like he doesn't help out a lot in terms of winning. He's been able to give you about 10 points, 2.5 assists per game. Was out of the fold in that game against UNC Wilmington, and it did feel like Georgia Southern was actually a little bit more put together without him. Now, the big question is, are you going to be able to get anything out of Carlos Curry, a guy that a season ago gave this Georgia Southern team right around about 7 points, 7 boards per contest? He's become a total afterthought. Why? I have no idea, but for Dunk City, it's not like this team is doing an amazing job on the class. Keyshawn Kellman, who comes in for Princeton, is able to give you about 13 points, 7 boards per contest. They're dealing with an injury to Isaiah Thompson, who's been their main scorer with about 14 points per game. Dunk City shoots about 33.5% from three-point range, but Andre Weir being in and out of the fold has been hurtful as well. We have not seen him since Thanksgiving, so that means that Zach Anderson is 12 points, 5 rebounds per game. It's really going to need to be big because Anderson and Coleman are the only two guys on the roster that are healthy. They're giving you at least 3.4 rebounds per game. It's a Dunk City team that's looking at ancillary pieces to be able to dole out the ball, as now they have been able to get right around about 3 assists per game out of Franco Miller Jr., but it is a Florida Gulf Coast team that has had a tough time guarding the three-point arc, 359th in all of college basketball. I think that there should be a little bit of positivity there. You've got a pair of teams that aren't necessarily looking to play up-tempo and with just a strange environment as well. Semi-total 142. I'm going to be looking at that 143 under, but Florida Gulf Coast trying to make them a 4-point favorite, so we'll take north of 4 here with Georgia Southern to go along with that under. 306-503, 306-504. It is Niagara, and they hit the road face off against Binghamton. Binghamton is a 6.5-point favorite. Totals between 144.5 and 146, and with Niagara, set them as a 5.5-point underdog. So now that we're getting 6+, I'm going to be willing to take the points with the Niagara team that has been uncharacteristically bad on defense. Typically, this is a team that under Greg Paulus, you know that they're going to be relatively solid with their defense and offense. It's going to be a little bit of a work in progress, but right now Niagara is allowing a lot of points on the defensive side of things. They're about 339th of the country in terms of both opponents' three-point shooting and points allowed on a per-possession basis. Meanwhile, you've got a Binghamton team that is a little bit top-heavy. Timu Chenery has come in from Quinnipiac. He's been able to do a nice job of being a double-figure scorer for this team. And then Samir Torrance, who was over at Syracuse, hasn't necessarily delivered a ton of scoring. He's been in that neighborhood about 10 to 11 points per game, but he just does it all for this team. As for him, he's going to give you about like 6 rebounds per game. He does a nice job doling out nearly 6 assists per contest, so I really love the way that he stepped up with that regard, shooting 40% from three-point range, but it's a Binghamton team that they only shoot about 68% of the free throw line. That could come into play in a late-game fouling situation. I do think that Niagara going to get a little bit more out of Kwan Marble and Luke Bumblelow moving forward. These two guys have combined for a little bit over 14 points per contest. Marble's shooting 45% from 3. Bumblelow 2 seasons ago at Ball State was a double-figure scorer that shot it really well from three-point range. And for Niagara, they have the best rebounder in this game in Harlan Obioa. He's a true 7-footer that's been able to give you about 8 rebounds per game. I like his overall game, and I do think that that's going to keep Niagara snug in a game where they only turn the ball over about 11 times per contest, so they do a nice job of being able to protect it there. It is a Niagara team that has been just, like I said, unsightly on defense, giving up north of 70 points in 4 of their last 5 games, but I do think that they're going to get back to basics against a Binghamton team that has been all over the place with their offense as far this season. So this is a spot where I did set my total at a 135.5. It is a situation where I'm going to be taking a look at the under. I think that Niagara gets back to their roots, and being able to get north of 6, going to be willing to take the points with Niagara. 306-505, 306-506. It is Alabama State, and they play USC, and USC is a 15.5 to a 16.5 point favorite. Your total is between 147.5 and 148.5. Very rare road game for USC, and we have seen power conference teams have a really tough time on the road thus far this season. I don't think that that's going to be the case here. It's going to be a very special game for Alabama State, but I did say USC as a 20-point favorite. I think that they house Alabama State, and I'm going to be willing to lay the number. With Ronnie James, he's not worth handicapping. He's not worth anything to the line to me. You've got Isaiah Collier and Boogie Ellis, so these guys are a combined 37 points per game. Ellis has been able to shoot 46% from three-point range, and it is a bunch in USC that does a really nice job of generating steals. Each of your top 3 scorers, Ellis, Collier, and then you've also had Kobe Johnson in the fold, combined for about 5.5 steals per game. They've been dealing with a little bit of an injury to Johnson, but now you got Vincent Iwuchukwu in the fold. He's been able to be a nice rebounder with about 5 boards per contest. You've got Joshua Morgan giving you those 2.5 blocks per game. And for Alabama State, the team is just a big-time work in progress. You've got the father-son duo that's going on here, which we always love to see with Tony and TJ Madlock. But in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis, Alabama State currently clocking in 275th in all of college basketball. This is actually going to be their first home game of the season, so very nice that they're able to get a little bit of a home game. But instead, so in terms of points scored on a per-possession basis, 328th. Alabama State does not have a ton down low, as they have to look to Madlock to do a little bit of everything. 16 points, 5 boards, 2.5 assists, 2 steals per game. When he's been out there, Deontay Bass has been solid with 16 points per game. Problem is, he's only played 2 games this far this season, which leaves Alabama State right now with 2 players are averaging north of 3.8 rebounds per game. That's not good going up against a USC team that is consistently year in and year out one of the top teams with regards to opponent 2-point shooting percentage in the country. Alabama State has found a little bit of 3-point shooting. They get about 43.5% outside shooting out of CJ Hines, who's been be able to give you about 12.5 points per game, but I do think that's going to be just way too much UNC in this spot. I recognize that's a little bit of a tricky situation with USC playing on the road, but I do think that they're going to overcome this and USC gets their season back on track. I did say USC as a 20-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. I did set my total at 146. I just don't think that Alabama State is going to be able to do their part with this total. So going to be diving in on the under and going to be willing to lay with USC. 306-507, 306-508. It is Presbyterian. They're facing off against Furman, and Furman does find themselves as a 13 to a 13.5 point favorite. Totals laying between 157.5 and 158.5, and I set Furman as a 10.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Presbyterian. Presbyterian has actually cranked up their tempo a little bit from seasons ago. Last year, they just could not find a way to be able to get the ball in the basket. Presbyterian now 106th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and they go up against a Furman team that, while they do an amazing job on offense, they do an amazingly bad job on defense. Furman 308th in all of college basketball. In terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, it is a Furman team that you know that you're going to be able to get a lot of offensive pop on this team, as they've had to make a little bit of a transition from the season ago after they had so many explosive players in the backcourt leave, but you still have had Carter Witt, the transfer from Wake Forest, a former top 250 recruit, be able to come in, do a relatively solid job of giving some facilitation and allowing JP Peaks to really cook and be that main man. Peaks, 18 points, 4.5 boards, 6 assists on 37% three-point shooting, and there's been no shortage of offense with this old Paladin team, as they have now gotten to at least 83 points in 4 of their last 5 games. That said, this is also a bunch that in their last 4 games against Division I competition, they have allowed at least 70 points in all of them, 78 plus in 3 of them. Meanwhile, you've got a Presbyterian team that has held up on defense. 71 points of fear surrendered in 3 of their last 4 games, so it is a little bit of a situation of something's got to give with Presbyterian. It's been all about Marquise Burnett along with Samaje Teal in the backcourt, combining for about 26 points per contest. Teal is shooting 47% from 3-point range, and as a whole, Presbyterian has been relatively efficient on the offensive side of things, shooting 36.5% from 3-point range. They only turn the ball over about 11.8 times per game, so you're able to get some good production on that front. It's just all about, are they going to be able to win that battle down low, as they don't have a ton of rebounding. You've been able to get about 10 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, Jonah Pierce, but it's not like this Furman team necessarily has someone like a Jalen Slauson, who a season ago was able to dominate things there. Tyrese Hughley is able to give you about 5.5 rebounds per game, but I just don't have any faith whatsoever that Furman, even though they're going to score their points, are going to be able to win that battle down low and be able to pull away by double figures. It's nice that they've got Alex Williams back in the fold, shooting 43% from 3 with 17 points per contest, but this is a spot where I do think that a well-put-together Presbyterian team is going to be able to hold in there, so I did set my line at a 10.5, getting 13.5. I'm going to be taking a look at the points, and did set my total at 156.5. This is a relatively solid Presbyterian team that they don't get out of sorts. It feels like they're in a little bit more control of these games, so I'm going to be diving in on the under and taking a look at the points. 306-509, 306-510. Albany is going to be playing us to Sacred Heart, and Sacred Heart is a 4.5 to a 5.5 point underdog. Your total is between 152 and 153, and with Sacred Heart, I did set them as an underdog of just 2.5 points. I'm going to be willing to take those points. It is an Albany team that has really cranked up the tempo under Dwayne Killings in his first season or two. The team was quite slow, and now they find themselves in the top 60 in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game. But for Albany, it is a team that feels like it's a little bit of a hodgepodge in that they do have the top rebounder in this game, in my opinion, and Jonathan Beagle. He's been able to do a nice job down low. He's giving you about 8.5 or so rebounds per game, but the backcourt feels like it's got a few, misfit pieces, for lack of a better term. You've been able to get some relatively good scoring right in the neighborhood, about 16 points per contest. Sebastian Thomas, he was a part-time starter over at Rhode Island a season ago, 4 boards, 4.5 assists, but is only shooting about 25.5% from 3. It is an Albany team that has turned the ball for 13 times per game, as each other top 3 scorers at least 2.6 steals per game. That's a little bit of an issue, and would like to see a little bit more out of Tyler Bertram as well. A few seasons ago was at Binghamton, where he was about a 9 to a 10 point per game scorer. Went to UAB last year, just really couldn't cut it there, and he's been up and down, though recently has been able to pick it up. It feels like 9+ points in 4 of the last 5 games, but for Sacred Heart, that dynamic duel of Tanner Thomas along Nico Galletti, I do think is going to be able to help them out in this one. Galletti has been really your main guy to be able to give you consistency and be out there on the floor, as Thomas has been in and out the last few games, and I do think that there's a good chance that he misses this game as well. 10.5 points, 5.5 boards per contest while shooting 48% from 3 for Thomas, but for Galetti, 7 boards, 2.5 steals, mid-30s point shooter, as a 6'6", little bit of a combo player, and if he's out of the fold, there is a nice and capable backup, and Alex Sobel has been able to do a really nice job in his absence. In 3 games, ever since we have seen Thomas be out of the fold, he's been able to do a nice job logging in this time span, 6 rebounds, 1.6 steals, in the neighborhood about 12 points per game, so he's done a nice job being able to step up in the absence. Got a Sacred Heart team that they do an okay job of taking care of the ball, 13 turnovers per game, and they play at a relatively similar tempo to that of Albany, so I do think that you're going to be able to get some scoring there. I think the big key is getting Raheem Solomon back online. He's only shooting about 29% for 3 with 6 points per contest. When he was at Niagara, he was consistently an 8 to a 9 point per game scorer. Last season had about 10.5 points per contest. I do think that he's going to be able to pick it up against an Albany team that certainly has been having their warts in terms of guarding from the outside, even though you do have Amari Marshall that comes in. He's been able to do a nice job giving you double figures after last season. He was over at Hofstra. It is an Albany team that has been really having a tough time knocking down their threes. Well, they've been quite lucky in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, as at home, opponents are shooting 24.1% from 3-point range. Certainly do think that that's going to be going northward, and with the tempo of both of these teams, I do think that things are going to be quite brisk. Set my total at a 152.5, now at a 153. Going to be willing to dive in on the under, even though I do see some regression with this Albany 3-point shooting defense, and I do think that with what Sacred Heart is able to do down low, they hold in there. So, willing to take the points with Sacred Heart, and going to be taking a look at the under. 306.511, 306.512. It is for International playing us to Stetson. Stetson finds themselves as 4 to 5 point underdogs, and your total on this game is anywhere between 147.5 to 148. I did set my total on 147, so I'm going to be willing to go in on the under. It's a Stetson team that has been all sorts of awful on defense in recent years. For the Stetson team, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they have been in the bottom 50 in all of college basketball each out of the last 2 years. Meanwhile, it's a Florida International team that they're willing to gamble for turnovers. For Florida International, top 25 team in all of college basketball in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. Yet, despite all those turnovers, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, this team is 193rd. And the big reason why is because Florida International, because they sell out for these turnovers, they leave themselves wide open to made threes, as they are 270th in the country in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and I do think that that's how Stetson is going to be able to hold in this game, as it is a Stetson team that has been able to do a really good job with their 3-point shooting. Though I do think that there's going to be a little bit of regression with them as well. You've got Jalen Blackman, who's been able to elevate to nearly 20 points per contest, but he's shooting an unrealistic north of 46% from 3-point range. I do think that that's going to be coming downward just a little bit, and I do think that this team is going to have such a tough time going up against the backcourt of Florida International that has a guy in Arterio Dean that is right now doing it all for the team. 13 points, 5 assists, 4.3 rebounds per game, leads the team in every one of those categories. 4 turnovers as well, so he leads the team in that category as well, but is currently forcing 4.2 steals per contest. That is a top 3 mark in all of college basketball. Going up against someone in Stephon Swenson, who he does a nice job giving you about 6 assists per contest for the Stetson team, and does a nice job of finding Blackman, who's up to now about 22 points per contest, but he also turns the ball over right around 3 times per contest. Overall, Stetson is shooting as a collective about 36.5% from 3-point range. The acquisition of Alec Oglesby, who was playing over at UNC Wilmington, has been invaluable. I combined 28 points in the last 2 games. Has shot 36% from 3-point range as far as the season, but his team is thin down low. You've got Eben Gasterse, who's been able to give you about 7.5 rebounds per game. Nobody else gives you north of 4.5 rebounds per game. So the main Achilles heel of Florida International, in that they have absolutely no size whatsoever. You've got one true forward that gives you north of 4 rebounds per game, and Jonathan Ibar, and that is it. You've had Mohamed Sanogo along with Seth Pinckney, just not really elevate down low, but you do have someone in Javante Hawkins who's able to shoot 40% from 3-point range. Take it to a Stetson team that, while they do such a good job of being able to shoot third threes, they do a terrible job of guarding the 3-point arc as well. As for Stetson, in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, they're allowing opponents to shoot about 33% from 3, about 150th in all of college basketball. They don't force any turnovers. They leave themselves vulnerable to a lot of drives as well. So I do think that for Florida National, they're going to be able to get it done in a game where I think it's going to be relatively low possession, and I do think that Stetson going to be forced into more turnovers than normal. So I did set my line at 5. I'm going to be willing to lay it with Florida International. And in terms of total, set mine at a 147. So you're at 147.5, 148. Going to be diving in on the under. 306, 513, 306, 514. Winthrop hits the road face off against South Carolina, and South Carolina does find themselves as 10 to 11 point favorites, and your total is between 142.5 and 143.5, and set South Carolina as a 9-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Winthrop. For Winthrop, they have seen a little bit of a dip in terms of some of their rebounding rebounding from a season ago, as last season you were able to get really good production with about 8+ rebounds to go along with 14+ points per contest out of Kelton Talford. Talford still giving you quite a bit of scoring, but down to 4 rebounds per game. The only guy in the roster that gives you north of 4 rebounds per game, that would be the Bucknell transfer in Alex Zimmerman with about 10 points, 6 boards, but this has become an even more dangerous Winthrop team from the outside, shooting 36.5% from 3. They've worked on the turnovers as well, only about 12 turnovers per game. This is not going to be a super duper up and down game. South Carolina outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game, and for Winthrop, while they are quite efficient on defense, they're not some sort of a blazer by any stretch of the imagination at about 234th in the country. Certainly South Carolina does have a leg up in terms of their defense. Winthrop still having a tough time with that regard, 216th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but I do foresee a little bit of regression coming through for this South Carolina three-point shooting unit as a collective, currently shooting about 37% from the outside. We have seen 3 other top 4 scorers shoot at least 39% from the outside, including Talon Cooper has been amazing at the guard spot. 9 points, 4 boards, 4.8 assists, a 1 turnover while shooting 48.5% from 3. Do think that there's going to be a little bit of a drop off there. Michi Johnson has really become their primary scorer with about 18 points per game, but one thing that does have me a little bit nervous about the South Carolina team, you really don't have a lot of rebounding. Johnson and BJ Mack are the only 2 guys on the roster that give you north of 4 rebounds per game. Mack as a 6'8" combo player, shooting about 33% from 3, 5 boards, 18.5 points per game. I do like his overall game, but with having KJ Doucette give you 14 points per game, with Winthrop doing a relatively solid job of being able to take care of the ball, I do think that it's going to take it out of a South Carolina team that has really been built on defense for the South Carolina team. They've given up north of 72 points, I believe, just twice this far this season. Meanwhile, it's a Winthrop team that just at will, they're getting to 80+ points. They've scored 85+ in 4 out of their last 5, so it's a good old situation of something's got to give, and I do think that Winthrop is going to be able to keep this game close enough to where we might get a little bit of late game fouling, and I do think that they're going to knock down some shots on South Carolina defense that it's pretty sturdy, but at the same time doesn't necessarily have a ton down low. So I'm going to be willing to take the points with Winthrop. Did set them as an underdog of 9 points, and I'm also going to be taking a look at this total over 3 is 6.515, 3 is 6.516. Mercer is going to be playing against the Queens NC, and Queens finds themselves as a underdog of a point to a point and a half. Totals anywhere between 148.5 and 149.5. Set Mercer as a 2-point favorite. I had to chop off a little bit of home court advantage, as I do think that this might be a little bit of a partial solid situation, but going to be willing to back Mercer in this spot. You've got 2 opposite teams. The Queens NC team that is looking to gun it. They're a top 50 team in the country in terms of total possessions per game. You've got a Mercer team as well outside the top 200 in terms of total possessions per game. So good old situation of something's got to give. It's just all about the versatility of Queens going up against what you're able to get out of Jalen McCreary of Mercer. For McCreary at 6'8", not a guy that's really going to stretch a floor or anything like that, but he just gives you what you need. 13.5 points, 5 boards, a block, a steal, and a half per contest. Plays relatively solid defense for a Mercer team that hasn't been terrible on the defensive side of things. As for Mercer, they have now given up 65 points or fewer in 2 out of their last 3 games, so they've been able to wise up a little bit on that front after they played a brutal schedule to begin the season. Losing to non-D1 Clark Atlantic did not help that out as well, and for Mercer, they're now shooting about 32.5% from 3. Robbie Carmody, the transfer from Notre Dame, has been the biggest reason why he's shooting 48% from 3-point range. It's a Mercer team that has been looking for answers in terms of being able to dole out the ball, and they have found it in Anthony Bernard. He has given you absolutely nothing in terms of scoring, but he's given out 3 assists per contest. He's doing a solid job not turning the ball over. Heck, taking a look at his last 3 games, a combined 13 assists, so he's been trusted a little bit more on that front. And then you do have a Queens team that sometimes does get a little bit out of sorts with the ball, about 12.2, 12.3 turnovers per game. They do a really nice job of being able to rebound by committee, as BJ McLaurin, AJ McKee, Deontay Albury. These guys are all able to give you between 5 and 6.5 rebounds per game. With McKee, he's been able to only shoot about 27% from 3. I do think that that's going to rise up as the season goes along, but this is a Queens team that I know has been pointed out by our good friend Nick Lawrenson, who's actually a part of that coaching staff, that this is a bunch that they just have been a little bit different when they've been on the road rather than when they have been at home. So having fewer kids on campus, I do think is going to be a beneficiary to them, but I still do have my question marks in terms of this Queens defense, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, clocking in 274th in all of college basketball. And to the credit of Queens, they've actually given up fewer points per possession on the road rather than at home, but still, it is a case where I do think think that Mercer going to be able to provide the better defense with Bernard being able to step up, be that main facilitator for the team. I do think that gives them just a little bit more stability. So I did set Mercer as a 2-point favorite. Going to be willing to lay the number. I do think that things get slowed down a little bit in this game. Set my total at a 146, so diving under and going to be willing to lay the small number here with Mercer. 306-517, 306-518. Central Connecticut plays us in Northeastern, and Northeastern is a favorite of between 3 and 4.5 points with your total between 139 and 140.5. And with Northeastern, I did set them as a favorite of 2 points. So being able to get north of 3, I'm going to be willing to take those points with Central Connecticut. It's a Central Connecticut unit that is not doing an amazing job down low, but when you take a look at Northeastern, other than Chris Doherty, who comes in from Notre Dame, 12 points, 7 boards per contest, you don't really have a lot on that front. Northeastern did an admirable job hanging in there against Virginia, but this is still a slow-tempo team that is committing about 13 turnovers per contest, and despite the fact that they are a slow-tempo team, they're still not necessarily that great on defense for Northeastern in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis. This team is well outside the top 200. As a matter of fact, they're hovering right around 300. For Central Connecticut, it's not like they're doing an amazing job on defense, but they're more around 171st in the country in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis. Now, the good news for Northeastern, Joe Pridgeon, who's dealt with injury not just this year, but throughout his career, looked very good in that game against Virginia, 11 points, 13 rebounds, so that's something that this team is able to build around moving forward, but backcourt still has some issues. They're shooting about 32.5% from three-point range, and they do have 40% three-point shooting out of a guy in Jared Turner who's been able to give you about 9.5 points per game, but with the Central Connecticut team, I do feel like the duo of Allen Jean Rose along Kellen Amos will be able to combine for about 24.5 points per game. They both give you about 4.5 boards. Amos, 3.5 assists per game. Is going to be able to win out, especially with Jean Rose being able to shoot 44% from three-point range. It is a Central Connecticut team that is shooting to 68% at the free throw line. You would like to see that go northward a little bit more, but with Amos coupled with Jordan Jones, these two guys have been able to give you about 3 steals per game. It is a Central Connecticut team that is going to be able to take advantage of the fact that Northeastern does get a little bit sloppy with the ball. For Northeastern, defense has been looking a little bit better recently. They have now given up 73 points or fewer in each of their last 3 games, but how about Central Connecticut? This team has given up 69 points or fewer in now 4 out of their last 5 games, with the lone exception being against Boston College. So I do think that things get bogged down quite a bit in this game. I set my total at a 134. I'm diving in on the under, and I do think that with Central Connecticut going up against a Northeastern team that sans Doherty doesn't have a lot of rebounding, they're going to be able to hold in there. So going to be willing to take the points with Central Connecticut, and I'm going to be diving in on the under. 306-519, 306-520. James Madison plays us to Coppin State. Coppin State between a 28.5 to a 29-point underdog. Totals ending between 144.5 and 145. And good grief, this Coppin State team, I think, is just going to get trucked. I set this line at 31. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. If you remember this game from last year, there was like multiple overtimes involved. Both of these teams got to 100 points. Coppin State has broken the 65-point plateau once thus far this season. I do not think that history is going to be repeating itself, and I do think that James Madison, after they got the scare in that game, they're pretty teed off, and I do think that they are going to be like, yep, we're going to lay it on you in this one. A Coppin State team that right now has one guy averaging double figures, and that'd be Justin Winston, who's been able to give you 14 points per contest. But for Coppin State, they're outside the top 250 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're averaging, I'm not even kidding here, 55.8 points per game. They really don't have anyone other than Winston that's giving you north of 4.1 rebounds per game. Nobody on this team gives you multiple assists per game. They do generate about 8.5 steals per game, but they turn the ball over 15 times per game while shooting 25% from three-point range. And we all rave about this James Madison team and all the offense that they've had, the fact that you've got pretty much 9 separate guys that play meaningful minutes for this team, the way that they're able to just have these interchangeable parts. But this James Madison team also has been able to do a nice job of being able to take away the ball, and as a result, they have been a team that has been in that top 125 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. TJ Bickerstaff has really been able to help out down low as well. 8.5 boards, 16 points per game for a James Madison team shooting north of 50% from the floor, 39% from 3. They're in the top 25 in terms of total possessions per game, yet they only turn the ball over 11.5 times per game. Michael Green, who comes over from Robert Morris, 5 assists to 1.6 turnovers per game. This team is very efficient. You've had Noah Friedel really be able to take off as well, and if you're able to get anything moving forward out of Quincy Allen, who's dealt with injuries throughout his career, a former top 200 recruit, you're looking at this team getting another big addition to a team that's already deep and is already so explosive. Coppin State has scored 59 points or fewer in each of their last 4 games, this team is getting dump trucked, and you've got a James Madison team that has gotten past the 80-point plateau in, I believe, all but one of their games thus far this season. They scored just 79 points in that game against Michigan State, so technically 2 games because they scored 79 points in that one. But that said, the team has been a rocket ship with regards to their offense, so I did set my total at a 147. I do think that we are going to see Coppin State score a few more points than normal in this game just because of the sheer amount of possession, so looking at the over, but James Madison willing to lay up to 30.5 with them. 3-6-5-21, 3-6-5-22. Chattanooga playing us through Gardner-Webb, and Gardner-Webb does find themselves as an underdog of 4.5 to 5.5 points. In your total on this game is between 141.5 and 143, and with Chattanooga, I did set them as a favorite of 7.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay this number for Gardner-Webb. This team is always based around playing good, hard-nosed defense, and this year they're outside the top 200 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They lost their main 2 shot blockers from last season, and Kareem Reed along with Lufail Dufil, and as a result, this defense has just not been the same. You've been able to have Caleb Robinson be versatile with about 14.5 points, 6.5 boards per contest. He's the only guy in the roster giving you north of 4.3 rebounds per game. You don't have a single guy in the roster giving you north of 0.7 blocks per game. They shoot 29% from 3, and to the credit of Gardner-Webb, they're protecting the ball a little bit better, but they just can't shoot to save their lives. They also shoot 65% at the free throw line, and Sam Alexis, who's been averaging a double-double, 12.5 points, 10.5 boards, 6'9" combo player that's able to shoot 33% from 3, should be able to have his way down low. And then you've got Hunter Off, who came over with Dan Earl from VMI. He was ineligible to play last year, and he has made the most of his opportunity this year with 16-plus points in each of the last 5 games and a combined 5 turnovers in the last 5 games. He has been so efficient, doling out 3 assists on 38.5% three-point shooting while chipping in there 17.5 points per game. Now, the issue that you always have with Chattanooga and Dan Earl coach teams is that while they're very explosive on offense, the defense leaves a little bit of something to be desired. 200th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but Chattanooga giving up 13 points fewer per 100 possessions at home rather than on the road, and it's really Gardner-Webb who's got their issues on defense. 77-plus points surrendered in each of their last 4 games against Division I competition. Now, for Chattanooga, it's not been savory by any stretch of the imagination, but at the very least, they're showing a little bit of a heartbeat on defense. 72 points or fewer surrendered in 3 out of their last 5 games as well. Neither of these teams necessarily do a great job of being able to generate a lot of steals, so I do think that you are going to be able to get a lot of clean possessions. Neither of these teams necessarily super-duper up-tempo, but with the way that Gardner-Webb is getting cooked on defense, I do think that Chattanooga going to be able to exploit that and be able to win this game on margin. I did set Chattanooga as a 7.5 point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay the number in. I did set my total at a 143.5 with the way that Gardner-Webb hasn't defended the way that they have in the past. So looking at the over, I'm going to be willing to lay it with the Mocs. 306.523, 306.524. Merrimack is on the road facing off against Cincinnati. Yes, we are on to Cincinnati, and Cincinnati is on to being a favorite of 17.5 to 18.5 points. Totals between 139.5 and 140.5, and with Cincinnati, I felt like they should have been north of a 20-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. I set them as a 23-point favorite. Merrimack's still doing a solid job of being able to generate turnovers. That is always a forte of this team, but defense just hasn't been the same this year as it has been in the past. They're right around about 141st in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They are allowing 6 points more per 100 possessions this year rather than a season ago, and for some reason, Merrimack has been playing a little bit more up-tempo. They've been closer to a mid-tempo team this year rather than in past years, and now they have to go up against a Cincinnati team that's just going to absolutely eat them for lunch down low. Merrimack, ever since they've come up to the Division I level, has been one of the worst rebounding teams in all of college basketball, and you've got for Cincinnati, out of your top 6 scorers, 4 of them giving you at least 5 rebounds per game, including Aziz Benego and Victor Lakine, both giving you between 8.5 and 9 rebounds per game apiece. And I mean, you've got a guy in Lakine who he stands north of 6'8". He's able to give you 2.5 assists per game. He's able to pop threes at a 33% clip. And for Cincinnati, they've cranked up their tempo a little bit. It's not like they're playing at warp speed or anything like that, but they have committed fewer than 10 turnovers per game while ranking in terms of total possessions per game right around about 115th. And with Merrimack, I don't know if they're going to be able to create the turnovers against them. Now, it's going to be something that Cincinnati is not used to, and you still have been able to have a pair of guys in Jordan DeCock along with Adam Clark be able to do a tremendous job, generating about 5.2 steals per game between the two of them. They both combine for a little bit over 6 assists, 29 points per game as well, but Merrimack also shooting 26.5% from three-point range. They are turning the ball over 14.5 times per game, and for Cincinnati, they don't force a ton of turnovers, but at the same time, they do a nice job playing sturdy, stout defense in terms of games that have wrapped up in regulation, because the game that they played against Howard, that was a game that went to overtime. They have given up north of 70 points just 3 times thus far this season. Meanwhile, you've got a Merrimack team, and all of a sudden, they have now given up 77 plus points in each of their last 2 games. They have had a little bit of a tough time with regards to these step-up games, and I do think that for Cincinnati, they're going to be able to plow Merrimack on the inside, and with Merrimack not getting the 3-point shooting that they were hoping for, they have been able to have Devin Savage come back, give you 11-point shooting in the mid-30s from 3-point range, but not having as much depth as they've had in past years, I do think it's going to be able to take it out of them. So this is a spot where I did set Cincinnati as a 23-point favorite. It's Cincinnati team that's towards the top of all of college basketball in terms of rebound rate, so wanted to lay the number and did set my total at 137 with the way that Cincinnati has played defense, a top 30 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. So diving under, I'm going to be willing to lay the number with Cincinnati. 306-525, 306-526. High point hopes to not be a low point as they play host to UNC Greensboro. And Greensboro, a 2 to 2.5 point underdog. Totals between 148 and 148.5. I did set High Point as a 2-point favorite. Now that we're getting to a 2.5, I'm going to be willing to take those points with UNC Greensboro. I'm seeing a 3 pop up as well. And for this UNC Greensboro team, you've got the Langley brothers who have done a nice job of being main contributors for the team, as Kobe Langley does a lot of the dirty work. He gives you multiple steals, 5 to 6 assists per game, not necessarily much of a score. Meanwhile, Keyshawn Langley chips in there about 13 to 14 points per game, but it's been Mikael Brown-Jones, he transferred from VCU, who has really been the standout for Greensboro. How about him shooting 58% from 3-point range, which I'll continue to say, we should see a fall off there, but 20 points, 7.5 boards, he has been tremendous for this unit. Now, for UNC Greensboro, we have seen a drop-off in terms of their defense. This is typically a team that under Mike Jones, you ask who, and I say Mike Jones, has been like a top 75 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis and a relatively pedestrian offense. This year, Greensboro, more in the neighborhood of 200th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but a team that's really ascending with their offense. So I will say this about Greensboro. They're actually giving up 4 points fewer per 100 possessions when they are on the road rather than when they are at home. And for this UNC Greensboro team, top 60 team in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Certainly was not expecting that. Now with High Point, they've really been able to had success early on this season due to their offense. They're currently a top 30 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, with Duke Miles doing a great job running the show, being able to give you 19 points, 4 assists per contest, and you do have some rebounding on this team as you got Kamani Hamilton, who comes in from Mississippi State. He and Jocelyn Bodu have been able to do a tremendous job combining for in the neighborhood of about 15.5 rebounds per game. Hamilton is able to give you 14.5 points per game, and as a whole, High Point 11.5 turnovers per game while shooting 37.5% from 3 as a slightly up-tempo team with this Greensboro team, though. I do feel like we're starting to find a little bit more defense with them as for Greensboro in games that have wrapped up in regulation, because their game against Eastern Kentucky went to overtime, so you toss that one out. They've now given up 73 points or fewer in each of their last 4 games that have wrapped up in regulation. Meanwhile, it is a High Point team that they themselves have given up 71 points or fewer in 4 out of their last 5 games. Neither of these teams are now playing at any sort of a blistering pace, but I do think that Greensboro able to hang in there with Donovan Atwell stepping up, shooting 40% for 3, 12.5 points per game, and I do feel like UNC Greensboro starting to find a little bit more of that defensive swagger. Still do think we're going to see nice execution in this game, which is why I did set my total at 148. At a 148.5, that becomes my buy point on the under, but with Greensboro, willing to take anything north of 2 with them. 306-527, 306-528. You've got the Drake, and they're going to be playing us at Alcorn St. Alcorn St, a 20.5 to a 22.5 point underdog. Totals between 152 and 154. Set my total at 153.5. I want that 152 over because of the way that Alcorn St is playing on defense. Bottom 5 team in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and they have played all but one of their games of the over thus far this season. This Alcorn St team is not guarding from the outside. They're not guarding from the inside. They're really not rebounding, with Jeremiah Kendall giving you about 7 boards, 16 points per game, and Drake should be able to take it to them. You've got Darnell Brody, who's able to do a nice job as a 6'10" big man, giving you 12 points, 7 boards, protecting the rim, but then you've got Tucker DeVries, one of the best do-it-all players in college basketball. 19 points, 7 boards, 3 assists, 2 steals. Not an amazing 3-point shooter, but you now have Connor Enright, who's been able to shoot 51% from 3-point range. And I do feel like Enright, coupled with Cooper Garland, a pair of guys combining for about 5 assists per game, getting the ball in their hands a little bit more is a good thing for this team. Would like to see a little bit more out of Kyron Gibson. He came in from UT Arlington, where he was averaging 11 points per game, and he's been seeing some minutes, but has not really contributed, as he's right now giving the team about 1.9 points and an assist and a half per contest. But this is an Alcorn St team that you can tell that they're missing Dominic Bruton from a season ago, as they just haven't had a lot of answers in the backcourt. Byron Joshua along Jeremiah Gambrell have been able to combine for about 23.5 points per game, and to the credit of Gambrell, he's been able to shoot about 49% from 3-point range and 50.5% from 3-point range when he has been on the road, but it is an Alcorn St team that, while they do a relatively solid job from the outside in terms of 2-point shooting percentage, or outside the top 300 with that regard, and was expecting a little bit more out of Jalen Hawkins, someone who, when he was at Norfolk State 2 seasons ago, was a 13-point per game scorer, only giving you in the neighborhood about 6 points per contest, and has been a little bit banged up this season. I do think that Drake going to take it to an Alcorn St team that's just been absolutely ghastly on defense. 86 plus points allowed at each of their last 4 games, and they have allowed at least 82 points in every one of their last 5 games, and there has not been a game against a Division I foe this year where they have surrendered fewer than 80, going up against a Drake team that they've been the opposite. They've given up fewer than 70 points in each of their last 5 games, but I do think that Drake going to be able to play an up-tempo game and really pad their offensive numbers. Willing to lay up to 23 with Drake, semi-total 153.5, so at a 153 or less, looking at the over and going to be willing to lay the number. 306-529, 306-530. You've got SMU, and they play us Houston Christian. Houston Christian is an underdog of 26 to 26.5 points, and your totals between 149.5 and 151. Houston Christian right now in the top 25 in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and in the bottom 25 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. That's not a great combo. Now, I did set my line at a 23, so I'm actually going to be willing to take the points with Houston Christian. Not something I've done a lot of this year, but it's more or less just a little bit of a fate of an SMU team that it just feels like they're a little bit of a band of misfit pieces. With SMU, they've actually been halfway decent on defense in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, a top 75 team, but at the same time, you are going with a unit that just really doesn't shoot it tremendously from three-point range as a whole. They shoot 33.5% from 3. This is pretty much all due to the fact that Chuck Harris gives you 14 points per contest, shoots 43.5% from three-point range. There's nobody else on the roster that notches more than 4.5 points per game, shooting above 27.3% from the outside, and it's just a really top-heavy team with Harris, along with Zarick Phelps. These two guys combine for about 30 points per game. They both give you about 2.5 assists per game, and to the credit of BJ Edwards, he's become a nice little facilitator. Only gives you about 4.5 points per game, but 3.5 boards, 3.8 assists per game. But outside these two guys, you don't have anyone else that gives you north of 8.6 points per contest. And with Houston Christian, it's not a necessity, but you do have a lot of guys doling out the ball and being able to share. Barak Moring has been able to give you about 9.5 points, 8.5 rebounds per game. Jay Alvarez has been dealing with a little bit of an injury, but he's back. He's been able to give you about 14.5 points, 4.5 boards. And for Houston Christian, is this a great shooting team? No. Are they going to shoot better than 25.7% from 3 when it's all said and done? Yes, especially with Marcus Green currently shooting 45% from the outside. Gives you about 3 assists, 14.5 points per game. You've also got a returning piece from last year in Pierce Bazile, who's been able to do a solid job throughout his career. Shot last year about 34.5% from 3. This year he's shooting 11% from 3. We should see that go a little bit northward. I think that this is going to be another fast, up-tempo game. As a result, I did set this total at a 155. I'm certainly going to be diving in on the over. SMU, not a team that's shy to run as well, but with Houston Christian catching 26 points, set my line at 23.5, going to be looking at those points to go along with the over. 306-531, 306-532. Loyola Chicago is playing us to Charleston Southern, and this will be the DK Network Write-Up pick with Loyola Chicago. They're anywhere between 17.5 to 18-point favorites, and your total on this game is anywhere between 136 to 138, and with Charleston Southern, I did set them as an underdog of 13.5 points. Getting the 17.5 like I'm seeing right now, that is going to be the write-up. You've got a Loyola Chicago team that is due in for some regression. Right now, they are the number 1 team in all of college basketball in terms of three-point shooting percentage, and I just can't see that lasting, as Loyola Chicago has allowed opponents to shoot from three-point range as far this season 22.7%. The last team that allowed opponents to shoot for an entirety of the season less than 23% from 3, you have to go back to the 2004-05 Norfolk State Spartans. Every other team in college basketball since then has allowed opponents to shoot north of 26.4% from the outside. For the Ramblers, they are attempting 45.2% of their shots from three-point range in their home games as well. That's a top 45 mark in all of college basketball. If you combine the non-D1 numbers and the D1 numbers, Charleston Southern is allowing opponents to shoot only 30% from 3. That is very much propped up by the bad competition. If you sort that out, they allow opponents to shoot about 32.5% from three-point range on the road. So they're not a bad defensive team with that regard. And you've got a Charleston Southern team that is coming off of a near upset against South Carolina. You do have to wonder if they're going to be a little bit drained from that, but they played a 4-point game against South Carolina. I actually think that that's a good thing, getting these guys swagger up a little bit. and they get to go up against the Loyola Chicago team that has not been good on the glass. They are outside the top 330 in terms of percentage of missed shots that they rebound as an offensive rebound. Miles Rubin, his 4.4 rebounds per game leads the way, and Tajay Kelly, he's been able to give Charleston Southern about 8.5 boards per contest. He should be able to win that battle down low. RJ Tuart, who comes over from Appalachian State, has been able to give you about 5.5 rebounds per game, and then you've got a nice primary scorer in R.J. Johnson, who's done a tremendous job shooting 43% from 3, 17.5 points per game. He's been able to log 20-plus points per contest in 3 out of the team's last 4 games, and they do go up against the Loyola Chicago. That's well outside the top 200 in terms of taking care of the ball, 13.5 turnovers per game for a team that they shoot it relatively well from 3. You've got Desmond Watson, who's been able to shoot north of 42% from 3, 11.5 points per game. Jaden Dawson, who's been able to return to the fold, but he's sort of been in and out all season long. He shot 46.5% from 3 with 9.5 points per game, but hasn't really been truly healthy all season long. And then you've had Philip Olsen, been dealing with a few injuries as well. Should be good to go in this one. A combined 52 points in the last 2 games, but I do think that Charleston Southern going to be able to do a relatively solid job down low. They're going up against the Loyola Chicago team that has been very careless with the ball, and it's a Loyola Chicago team that has been all over the place in terms of their defense as well. In their last 4 games, they have given up 53, 88, 64, and 77 points. Meanwhile, for Charleston Southern, this has been a rough offense. They have not broken the 70-point plateau in any of their last 5 games, but I do think that they hold up on the glass, force a few turnovers to be able to hold lively in this game. My DK Network right to pick is taking the points with Charleston Southern, and with this total, I did set my total at a 139.5. Here at a 136 to a 138, I think that there's going to be massive regression with this Loyola Chicago outside shooting defense, so going to be looking at the over, and my write-up is on taking the points with Charleston Southern. 3 of 6, 533, 3 of 6, 534. Florida State is going to be playing us to North Florida. North Florida finds themselves as 16.5 to 17-point underdogs, and your total on this game anywhere between 150.5 and 151. And with Florida State, I did set them as a favorite of 15 points. So being able to get north of 16, I'm going to be willing to take the points with North Florida. It is a Florida State unit that is looking to really run it and gun it up in the top 40 in terms of total possessions per game. North Florida is not particularly an up-tempo team. They're more around about 150th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, when it's really been to the detriment of North Florida's ranking 273rd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And Florida State, after they got quite lucky with opponent 3-point shooting to begin the season, that has been starting to taper off a little bit as well, though you do have a pair of guys in Jameer Watkins along with Darren Green Jr., but able to do a nice job combining for about 25.5 points per contest, both shooting in the neighborhood about 34.5 to 36.5% from 3-point range as a unit. Florida State shoots about 34.5% from 3, the 13 turnovers per game. You'd like to see that be a little bit lower end for Florida State. I do think that they might struggle a little bit with the versatility of Jake Vanderhuysen. He comes in from Bucknell and at right around 6'8", shooting 38.5% from 3-point range, 7.5 points per game. Love what he's been able to bring to the table. You don't necessarily have a ton of rebounding for this North Florida team, with guys like Jalen Gainey returning to the fold for Florida State. You still have Baba Miller in there. They should be able to win that battle down low. But North Florida, they take care of the ball with only about 12 turnovers per game. They shoot 35.5% from 3-point range, with out of their top 6 scorers, 5 of them shooting at least 37.5% from 3-point range. Headline scorer for the team has been Chaz Lanier, who's been able to give you about 15 points per game, while North Florida going to leave quite a bit of something to be desired defensively. It has improved a little bit, 72 points of fear surrender in each of their last 3 games. Meanwhile, you've got a Florida State team that has just been sort of stuck in the mud. 72 points or fewer scored in their last 5 games in regulation. They did score 77 against Colorado, but in regulation they failed to get to 70. So good old situation of something's got to give. I do think that this becomes an up and down game where defense is going to be a little bit optional. So this is a total that I did set at a 155, getting what we're getting with about a 151. I'm going to be looking at the over, but with North Florida getting 16 plus, going to be willing to take the points to go along with that over. 306, 535, 306, 536. Tulsa's playing us to Mississippi Valley State. The Delta Devils are between 22 and 23-point underdogs. Totals between 134 and 134.5, and I set Tulsa as a 26.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. There's just not anything that Mississippi Valley State is doing well. Sans having one really nice player in Raekwon Brown. I will give Raekwon Brown the credit where it is due. This guy has been able to put up double figures. He's dealing with a team that just should not probably be at the Division I level right now. We're going to call it what it is, but he's been able to give the team 15.5 points, 5 boards per game. He's gotten a little bit of help out of Donovan Sanders, who gives you about 10 points, 2.2 assists, but also 3.3 turnovers per game as well. It's a Mississippi Valley State team that's outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game. They shoot 27.5% from 3, 16.5 turnovers per game, and for Mississippi Valley State, they currently average 48.7 points per game this year. Good grief. They are scoring about 7 points fewer per 100 possessions than any other team in all of college basketball in regulation because their game against Pacific went to overtime. They have not broken the 60-point plateau. And now they go up against a Tulsa team that's looking to run and gun it. Tulsa in the top 35 in terms of total possessions per game. You've been able to get some good production out of PJ Haggerty. He's been able to give you about 17 points, 3 assists, 2.5 steals per game, as he and Kobe Williams are right now combining for about 5.1 steals per contest. Now Tulsa, they get loose with it as well, about 15 turnovers per game. They only shoot in the neighborhood about 32% from three-point range, but have a lot more rebounding with the team as well, with Jared Garcia being able to give you 6.5 boards per contest. Tulsa has done really well against bad competition in step-up games. They have fallen short. This is the definition of really bad competition. I do think that we are going to be seeing some domination here. Did semi-total at a 140.5. Does our good friends the Delta Devils oblige with this total? I think yes. I think we're going to get just enough for them to be able to give you like 55 or so to be able to crank this one over, as I did set Tulsa as a 26.5 point favorite. So want to lay it with Tulsa and going to be taking a look at the over because I think we get enough possessions for it, and we wrap things up with 3 of 6-5-37, 3 of 6-5-38. Maryland plays those to Nichols. Nichols finds themselves as underdogs of 17.5 to 19.5 points, and Toulon's game is anywhere between 136 and 137.5. Did set my line at 17. Being able to get north of 17, seeing a lot of 18 to 19s out there, I'm going to be willing to take the points. It is a Nichols unit that they still do a relatively solid job of being able to generate turnovers. They lose their coach Austin Clonch in the offseason. He joined the Alabama coaching staff, and for Nichols, it has been pretty ghastly on defense. They're 5th in the country in terms of points allowed on per possession basis, going up against a Maryland team that they've been better recently with their offense. It's still not amazing. The forte of this Maryland team is being able to defend in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. For Maryland, they are 22nd in all of college basketball, so it is a little bit of situation of something's got to give, but this is a Maryland team that they have been very undisciplined with regards to their offense. They are a squad that very much relies upon Jameer Young to do it all, with 17 points, 4 assists, 1.7 steals per game, and as a team, it's went up a little bit more, and I do think that when it's all said and done, it'll be a little bit better than this still, but 25.5% three-point shooting team. It is a Maryland team that they force about 8.7 steals per game. They're one of the better perimeter shooting defenses in the country, as well as they don't allow you to take threes. Meanwhile, they don't shoot very well from three-point range as well, but this is a Nichols team that is not looking to go too much from the outside because they do have Jamal West and his versatility. At 6'6", does shoot 43% from three in his own right, but 16 points, 3 assists, 8 boards, 1.7 blocks per contest. It's a Nichols team that overall they do shoot about 34.5% per three, but they get 8 steals per game. They're looking to turn defense into offense. They've gotten in the neighborhood about 11 points per game out of Robert Brown III. He's been able to make a nice impact on the team. Now, you have been dealing with quite a few injuries as well. It's Byron Ireland. He's been able to do a nice job of giving you about 12.5 points per game. Was missing for much of the season, but should be good to go here. That's big because they've been missing Deontay Smith really ever since Thanksgiving. He was a nice guy that was able to give you 2.3 steals at 6'6", had some relatively good versatility. So being able to get someone in there for him, that's big. Micah Thomas has been able to give you a little bit of facilitation over the last few years with shooting 42% from three. They've also been having him deal with a little bit of an injury as well, and as a result, you've been looking a little bit more to Michael Gray, who's been able to up his scoring quite a bit. I like what I've been seeing out of him, as he's been able to give you about 8 points per contest in the last 5 games. Someone who overall for the season only does give you about 5.5 points per game, but has been able to give you a few more steals. I do think that Nichols and their unique style is going to pose for some challenges against a Maryland team that, quite frankly, has had a tough time putting the ball in the basket. I do think that Maryland is going to see an uptick with their three-point shooting. I think that this is going to be a little bit more of an up-and-down game, so semi-total 141, looking at the over and looking at the points from Nichols, set them as a 17-point underdog, and now wrap things up for the Tuesday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. A big thanks to Sean Paul. Does great work over at the Field of 68. Join me in the last segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, remember to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, whatever you for this podcast, you have one of 2 ways we'll fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at Jaden_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline, and the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire on whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast. So I have that 5-star review coming at you guys every single day throughout the college basketball season, and that means I'm coming at you once again tomorrow. Thanks so much for tuning in.